Hey, amazing viewers! Thanks for clicking on Fanfic TV. Today's special feature is: what if Doctor Strange found Harry during Sorcerer Supreme duties at age 9 and trained him in both magic systems by age 10? Your support through likes, shares, and subscriptions helps us reach more story lovers around the world. Thank you for being part of this community. Now, let's escape into this wonderful story. Chapter 1. The Awakening. The Sanctum Sanctorum hummed with ancient energies as Dr. Stephen Strange hovered 3 feet above the polished floor, legs crossed in lotus position. His consciousness stretched beyond the confines of the New York brownstone, beyond the physical realm itself. This daily meditation allowed him to sense the subtle shifts in Earth's mystical currents, a cosmic early warning system for a man tasked with protecting reality from forces beyond mortal comprehension. Strange's astral form drifted through dimensional barriers, scanning for threats. The routine had become second nature in his years as Sorcerer Supreme. Most days revealed nothing more than minor fluctuations, natural ebbs and flows in the fabric of magic. Today was different. A discordant note rippled through the ethereal symphony. Strange's consciousness snapped toward the disturbance, a pulsing anomaly across the Atlantic. Not the chaotic signature of an interdimensional breach, but something more peculiar, untamed, raw magical potential cycling between explosive surges and desperate suppression. Strange's eyes flew open, his physical form dropping gracefully to the floor as his astral self reunited with his body. "Wong!" he called, striding toward the Sanctum's vast library. The stocky librarian appeared from between towering bookshelves, his perpetually serious expression unchanged. "I felt it too. Locate the source," Strange instructed, his hands already weaving complex patterns in the air. Golden sigils materialized, forming a locator spell that pulled from the memory of the anomaly. "England," Wong said, watching the mystical coordinates form. "Surrey. A mundane suburb called Little Whinging." Strange's brow furrowed. "Not a known nexus point. Nothing in our records indicates magical significance there." He dismissed the spell with a wave. "And yet the power signature is remarkable, untrained but immense." Wong's eyes narrowed. "There are other magical communities, Strange. This could fall under their jurisdiction." "The wand wielders?" Strange's mouth quirked. "Possible. Though this doesn't bear their signature. It's wilder, more instinctual." He turned toward a glass case where the eye of Agamotto rested. "Whatever it is, it's growing unstable. I need to investigate before it draws attention from less benevolent entities." Wong nodded, already moving toward another section of the library. "I'll prepare a dossier on the known magical enclaves of Britain. Their ministry is territorial. So am I," Strange replied, his crimson cloak of levitation sweeping from its display to settle around his shoulders like an old friend reuniting with its master. "I'll be back before dinner." "You always say that," Wong muttered, but Strange had already opened a portal, a perfect circle of sparking energy revealing the nighttime streets of a painfully ordinary suburban neighborhood. "Mind the Sanctum," Strange said, stepping through. The portal closed behind him with a sound like glass shattering in reverse, leaving only empty air where the Sorcerer Supreme had stood. Number 4, Privet Drive looked exactly like every other house on the street: pristine lawn, identical brickwork, curtains drawn tight against the evening. Yet to Strange's mystic senses, it pulsed like a beacon, magical energy contained within its walls fluctuating dangerously. Cloaking himself with a simple invisibility spell, Strange approached. The energy grew more erratic with each step. This was no seasoned practitioner losing control. This was raw, untapped potential struggling against constraint. The signature had the unmistakable flavor of a human source, not an artifact or dimensional anomaly. A child's terrified scream pierced the quiet street, emanating from the house. Strange abandoned subtlety. With a gesture, he transported himself inside, materializing in a narrow hallway. The magical signature intensified, pulling him toward a small door beneath the stairs. Another scream, followed by a man's angry shout. "Enough of your freakishness, boy!" The door to the cupboard rattled, locked from the outside. Strange could sense the frightened heartbeat within, racing like a trapped bird. More concerning was the magical energy coalescing around the small space, reality itself warping as uncontrolled power sought release. A large, purple-faced man stormed down the hallway, keys jangling in his meaty hand. He froze mid-step as Strange dropped his invisibility spell. "Who the devil are you?" the man sputtered, face transitioning from purple to white. "How did you get in my house?" Strange ignored him, focusing instead on the cupboard door, which had begun to glow with an unearthly light along its edges. "Step aside," Strange commanded. When the man didn't move, Strange made a subtle gesture. The portly figure found himself gently but firmly pressed against the wall. "Petunia!" the man bellowed. "Call the police!" Strange touched the cupboard door, magical symbols flaring around his fingers as he assessed the situation. What he sensed inside made his breath catch, a magical core more powerful than any he'd encountered in a child, fluctuating wildly with fear and pain. "Release me this instant!" the man continued shouting. "You have no right, silence!" Strange said quietly, and the man's voice cut out though his mouth continued moving. Strange unlocked the cupboard with a thought and pulled the door open. Inside, huddled on a thin mattress, was a small boy with unruly black hair and startlingly green eyes magnified by broken, taped-together glasses. Tears streaked down his face, but most alarming was the corona of energy visibly pulsing around him, a magical immune response to extreme distress. Objects within the tiny space hovered inches above surfaces. A small toy soldier spun in midair near the ceiling. The boy looked up, terror shifting to confusion at the sight of the caved stranger. "Hello, Harry," Strange said gently, immediately understanding who he'd found. The lightning bolt scar was unmistakable, even to someone not fully versed in wand-wielder lore. "My name is Dr. Strange. I'm here to help." How do you know my name?" the boy whispered, pressing himself against the wall. "That's a longer conversation," Strange replied. "But right now, I need you to breathe with me. Your magic is responding to your emotions, and it's becoming dangerous." "Magic isn't real," Harry said automatically, as if reciting a painful lesson. "Uncle Vernon says." The floating objects suddenly dropped as a woman's scream cut through the air. Strange turned to see a horse-faced woman frozen in the hallway, horror etched across her features. "You're one of them," she hissed, eyes darting between Strange and the boy. Strange ignored her, turning back to Harry. "Magic is very real, Harry. And yours is extraordinarily powerful." He extended his hand, palm up. A small butterfly made of golden light materialized above it, wings gently flapping. "May I come in?" Harry's eyes widened at the magical construct, fear giving way to wonder. He nodded wordlessly. Strange knelt at the cupboard entrance. There wasn't room for him to enter fully, and sent the butterfly floating toward Harry. The boy hesitantly reached out, and the construct landed on his finger, its light reflecting in his glasses. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Strange said softly. "Now breathe with me. In through your nose for 4 counts, hold for 7, out through your mouth for 8. As Harry followed the breathing exercise, the chaotic energy around him began to stabilize. Strange subtly wove containment spells into the rhythm, helping to calm the magical storm. The boy's shoulders relaxed incrementally. "That's excellent, Harry. You're doing wonderfully." Behind him, Vernon Dursley had found his voice again. "Now see here. Whatever freakish business you're about, you have no right to break into our home. The boy is our responsibility and—" Strange rose to his full height, the cloak of levitation billowing dramatically as he turned. His eyes glowed with eldritch energy as he fixed Vernon with a stare that had cowed demons. "Your responsibility?" Strange's voice remained quiet, but power resonated in every syllable. "Is that why a child with extraordinary gifts is locked in a cupboard? Why he wears clothes 4 sizes too large and glasses held together with tape? Why he doesn't know about his heritage or the sacrifice his parents made?" Vernon's face purpled again. "We never asked for him. Dumped on our doorstep with nothing but a letter, told to keep him safe from those freaks who killed his parents. We fed him, clothed him, abused him. Strange finished coldly. Neglected him. And now his untrained magic is reaching critical levels that could tear a hole in reality. He stepped closer to Vernon, who tried unsuccessfully to back away from the invisible force holding him against the wall. I've protected this dimension from beings that would make your nightmares seem like pleasant dreams, Mr. Dursley. Beings that feed on fear and pain, the very environment you've created for this child. Petunia found her voice. You can't take him. The protection, Lily's protection, only works if he stays with blood relatives. That's what he said. Strange's attention shifted to her, expression softening slightly. Ah. Albus Dumbledore. Blood wards. He nodded, familiar with the concept if not the specifics. A powerful protection, certainly, but one that requires a foundation of care, Mrs. Dursley. The wards have been weakening for years because this home has never truly been Harry's home. He gestured, and complex runic diagrams appeared in the air, showing the failing magical barriers around the property. They're collapsing. Whatever protection they once offered is nearly gone. Fear flashed across Petunia's face. Then we're in danger. Those people who wanted him dead, Lord Voldemort's followers. Strange nodded. Yes, potentially. Though most are imprisoned or in hiding. He studied the floating diagrams. Ingenious spellwork, if flawed in execution. Dumbledore always did favor the elegant solution over the practical one. Harry had crawled to the cupboard entrance, watching the exchange with wide eyes. The butterfly construct still perched on his finger, its light illuminating his thin face. You knew my parents? He asked hesitantly. Strange turned back to Harry, his expression gentling. No, I didn't have that honor. But I know of them, and of you. You're rather famous in certain circles, Harry Potter. Famous? Me? Harry's face scrunched in disbelief. Harry, there's a great deal you should know, about your parents, about yourself, about magic. Strange glanced around the cramped hallway. This isn't the place for that conversation. He crouched down again to meet Harry's eyes. I'd like to take you somewhere safe, where I can help you understand and control your abilities. Would you be willing to come with me? Fear and hope warred on the boy's face. Will I have to come back? The question broke something in Strange's carefully maintained composure. Children shouldn't fear returning to their homes. No, Harry. You won't have to come back here. Now wait just a minute. Vernon blustered, struggling against the magical restraint. You can't just take the boy. We're his legal guardians. Strange straightened. Actually, I can and I will. The boy is in magical danger that threatens not only himself but potentially this entire neighborhood. He turned to Petunia. I assume you'd prefer this handled quietly? Without involving your, what's the word you use? Normal neighbors? Petunia's lips thinned to a bloodless line. What about the protection? You said yourself there are people who want him dead. I'll establish new protections, Strange said dismissively. One's not dependent on a family connection that exists only in blood and not in love. He returned his attention to Harry. Would you like to gather your things? Harry glanced back into the cupboard, then shook his head. I don't have much. Strange nodded, suppressing a flare of anger. We'll remedy that. He held out his hand. After a moment's hesitation, Harry took it, stepping fully out of the cupboard for the first time in what had clearly been hours. Strange released his magical hold on Vernon, who immediately puffed up like an indignant bullfrog. Before the man could speak, Strange made a circular gesture with his free hand. A portal opened in the middle of the Dursleys' hallway, revealing the interior of the Sanctum Sanctorum. Petunia shrieked. Vernon stumbled backward. Harry's grip tightened on Strange's hand. Is that magic? Harry whispered, all overtaking fear. One form of it. Strange replied. There are many. He looked back at the Dursleys. You'll be contacted regarding the legal arrangements. I suggest you cooperate fully. With that, he led Harry through the portal, which closed behind them with a shower of golden sparks, leaving the Dursleys staring at empty air where their unwanted charge had stood moments before. Wong was waiting on the other side, arms crossed, expression unreadable as Strange emerged with a small, wide-eyed boy. "I see you found the anomaly," he said dryly. "Wong, meet Harry Potter," Strange replied, guiding the boy forward. "Harry, this is Wong, librarian of Camartage and guardian of mystic knowledge." Harry, clearly overwhelmed but making a valiant effort at politeness, extended his hand. "Pleased to meet you, sir." Wong's stoic expression softened as he shook the offered hand. "The pleasure is mine, young Potter." He shot Strange a questioning look. "I take it this is not a temporary visit?" "No," Strange confirmed. "Harry will be staying with us for the foreseeable future. His magical education begins immediately." Harry's head swiveled between them, taking in the Sanctum's impossible architecture and ancient artifacts with wide eyes. "I still don't understand. You said I have magic, but Uncle Vernon always said, your uncle," Strange interrupted gently, "was afraid of what he didn't understand. But yes, Harry, you have magic. Extraordinary magic, in fact." "But why me?" Strange guided Harry to a comfortable chair near the central staircase. "You were born with it. Your parents had it too." "My parents?" Harry's voice wavered. "Aunt Petunia said they died in a car crash because my dad was drunk." Strange and Wong exchanged glances. "That," Strange said carefully, "is not what happened. Your parents, Lily and James Potter, were murdered protecting you from a dark wizard called Lord Voldemort." Harry's face paled. "Murdered? By a wizard?" "Yes. A powerful, evil wizard who targeted your family. When he tried to kill you as well, something remarkable happened." Strange hesitated. "His spell rebounded. It destroyed his body and left only that scar on your forehead. You're the only person known to have survived the killing curse." Harry's hand rose unconsciously to touch his lightning bolt scar. "So that's why you said I'm famous? In the wizarding world, you're known as the boy who lived," Wong confirmed, returning with a tray bearing 3 steaming cups of tea. He offered one to Harry, who accepted it with trembling hands. "There's a wizarding world?" Harry looked between them. "Are you wizards too?" "Not exactly," Strange said, accepting his own cup. "We're sorcerers, practitioners of the mystic arts. It's a different tradition from the wand-wielding wizardry your parents practiced, though both draw from the same fundamental energies of the multiverse." Harry's brow furrowed. "I don't understand the difference." Strange smiled. "Few do, even among the educated. Think of it this way. Wand wizards are born with an internal magical core that they channel through wands and specific incantations. Sorcerers like Wong and myself learn to harness energy from other dimensions, shaping it through knowledge, will, and practice forms." "And I can do both?" Harry asked, taking a cautious sip of tea. "That's what makes you unique," Strange said, leaning forward. "You have a wizarding core, inherited from your parents, but you've also been unconsciously drawing energy from the dimensional planes when your emotions run high. It's why your magic has become unstable recently. 2 systems, operating simultaneously without proper training in either." Harry frowned, processing this. "Is that bad?" "It's unprecedented," Wong corrected. "And potentially very powerful." Strange nodded. "Which is why I need to teach you control before you return to the wizarding world. Your uncontrolled abilities are dangerous, to yourself and others." "Return?" Harry perked up. "There are others like my parents? People who knew them?" "Many," Strange confirmed. "And when you turn 11, you'll receive an invitation to attend Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, the same school they attended." Hope bloomed across Harry's face, then dimmed. "But that's almost 2 years away." "Which gives us time," Strange said, setting down his cup. "Time to train you in the fundamentals of both magical systems. Time to heal and grow stronger. By the time your Hogwarts letter arrives, you'll be ready." Harry stared down at his hands. "What if I'm not any good at magic? What if I can't learn?" Strange's smile was gentle. "Harry, you've been doing magic unconsciously for years. I found you because your power grew strong enough to detect from another continent. Trust me, Ability isn't your problem. Harry nodded uncertainly, then his stomach growled loudly. He blushed, ducking his head. When did you last eat? Wong asked, his tone neutral but his eyes sharp. Yesterday morning, Harry admitted quietly. I accidentally turned my teacher's hair blue, and Uncle Vernon said freaks don't deserve dinner. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as Strange and Wong exchanged glances. Strange rose, his expression carefully controlled. Wong, perhaps you could show Harry to the kitchen while I make some arrangements. Wong nodded, understanding the unspoken message. Come, young Potter. The Sanctum's kitchen may not rival Hogwarts, but I believe we can find something suitable. As they departed, Strange moved to his study, his movements precise with suppressed anger. He had suspected the boy's home situation was poor, but the reality was worse than he'd imagined. He'd need to contact Dumbledore. The old wizard had placed Harry with those people, after all, but first, some immediate measures were required. Strange summoned a blank parchment and began to write. Magic had rules, even between different traditions, and he had just unilaterally removed the boy who lived from his appointed guardians. There would be consequences, diplomatic incidents even, but Strange had seen enough to know he'd made the right choice. The boy deserved better. And if the wizarding world objected, they could take it up with the Sorcerer Supreme directly. Harry woke the next morning convinced he'd dreamed everything: the Cape Doctor, the magical portal, the truth about his parents. He kept his eyes squeezed shut, knowing that when he opened them, he'd see the familiar underside of the cupboard stairs. Instead, sunlight warmed his face. He cautiously opened one eye, then both widened in amazement. He lay in an actual bed in a room larger than the Dursleys' master bedroom. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating walls lined with bookshelves. Strange artifacts hung between the shelves, things that glowed, floated, or seemed to move when he wasn't looking directly at them. Good morning, Harry, came a deep voice from the doorway. Dr. Strange stood there, no longer wearing his elaborate cape but still dressed in unusual blue robes with intricate patterns along the edges. It wasn't a dream, Harry breathed, sitting up. No, Strange confirmed with a small smile. Though I understand the confusion. Your life has changed rather dramatically in the past 12 hours. Harry nodded, running his fingers over the soft blanket covering him, the most comfortable bed he'd ever slept in. What happens now? Breakfast first, Strange said. Then we should discuss your training and living arrangements. 20 minutes later, freshly showered and wearing clothes that Strange had conjured for him, actual clothes that fit, not Dudley's cast-offs, Harry sat at a kitchen table across from Strange and Wong. Between them lay a feast that rivaled anything Aunt Petunia had ever prepared for Dudley's birthdays. Eat as much as you like, Strange encouraged, noticing Harry's hesitation. You need your strength. Harry didn't need telling twice. He filled his plate, trying not to appear too greedy but unable to resist the array of foods he'd been denied at the Dursleys. While you were sleeping, Strange said once Harry had taken the edge off his hunger, I made contact with Albus Dumbledore, the headmaster of Hogwarts and the wizard who placed you with your relatives. Harry's fork paused halfway to his mouth. You told him I'm here? I did, Strange confirmed. As I expected, he had concerns about removing you from your aunt's home. The blood protection was his creation, powerful old magic tied to your mother's sacrifice. But you said it was failing anyway, Harry said, remembering the glowing diagrams in the Dursleys' hallway. Correct. A protection based on love and blood requires at least a modicum of the former. Your aunt may share blood with your mother, but she didn't extend love to you. Strange's expression darkened momentarily before clearing. In any case, Dumbledore has agreed to a meeting here at the Sanctum this afternoon. Harry swallowed hard. Will he make me go back? No. Strange's voice was firm. That's non-negotiable. But we do need to establish new protections and formalize your magical guardianship. Wong set down his tea. The Ancient One would have questions about this arrangement. Strange nodded. Many, I'm sure. But she also understood that some rules must bend to serve greater purposes. Harry glanced between them. Who's the Ancient One? My teacher, Strange explained. The previous Sorcerer Supreme before me. She understood that rigid adherence to tradition can sometimes do more harm than good. After breakfast, Strange led Harry to a circular room at the heart of the Sanctum. Mystical artifacts lined the walls and display cases, and in the center, a skylight illuminated a raised platform inscribed with arcane symbols. This will be your primary training area, Strange explained. Each morning, we'll begin with meditation to help you connect with your magical core and the dimensional energies around you. Harry approached the platform hesitantly. Will I learn to do the things you can do? Like make portals? Eventually, Strange said. But first, you need to learn control. Both magical traditions require discipline and focus, especially in your unique case. He motioned for Harry to sit cross-legged in the center of the platform. Close your eyes. Focus on your breathing. Harry obeyed, though his posture betrayed his nervousness. Magic responds to emotion, Strange continued, circling slowly. That's why yours surges during moments of fear or anger. The first step is learning to recognize the feeling of your magic, to sense it before it manifests. Harry's brow furrowed in concentration. I'm not sure what I'm looking for. Think back to moments when strange things happened around you. What did you feel just before? Harry thought hard, remembering turning his teacher's hair blue, appearing suddenly on the school roof, growing back his hair overnight after a particularly awful haircut from Aunt Petunia. A kind of tingling, he said slowly. Like pins and needles, but inside. And warmth, spreading from my chest outward. Good, Strange praised. That's your magical core, your internal reservoir. Now, try to find that sensation again, but without the emotional trigger. For nearly an hour, Harry sat in meditation, occasionally describing sensations as Strange guided him deeper into awareness of his own magic. By the end, a faint golden glow had begun to manifest around Harry's hands, visible evidence of his progress. Excellent work, Strange said as Harry opened his eyes. Most students take days to achieve what you've done in one session. Harry beamed at the praise, something he'd rarely received in his life. Can I try making something like that butterfly now? He asked eagerly. Strange chuckled. Not quite yet. Creating constructs requires precise control and visualization. But perhaps something simpler. He produced a feather and placed it on the floor before Harry. In wizarding training, one of the first spells taught is levitation. Without a wand, it's more challenging, but the principle is the same. Focus on the feather, feel your magic, and visualize it rising. Harry stared intently at the feather, brow furrowed in concentration. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then, just as frustration began to show on his face, the feather trembled and rose shakily an inch off the ground. I'm doing it! Harry exclaimed, and promptly lost concentration, the feather dropping. Indeed you are, Strange said, genuine pride in his voice. That's remarkable progress for your first conscious attempt. Harry frowned. But I lost it as soon as I got excited. Control comes with practice, Strange assured him. You've spent years suppressing your magic to avoid punishment. Learning to channel it purposefully will take time. Their lesson continued until midday, by which time Harry had successfully levitated the feather several times, holding it aloft for increasingly longer periods. Though exhausted, his eyes shone with accomplishment. Rest now, Strange instructed. Magical exertion requires physical recovery, especially for beginners. Professor Dumbledore will arrive soon, and you should be refreshed for that meeting. Harry nodded, reluctantly setting aside practice. Dr. Strange? Thank you. For everything. Strange's usually austere expression softened. You're welcome, Harry. Now get some lunch. Wong has been cooking something that smells suspiciously like his grandmother's dumplings, which means we're in for a treat. Albus Dumbledore arrived at the Sanctum Sanctorum precisely at 3 o'clock, though not by conventional means. The ancient wizard simply appeared in the foyer with a soft pop of displaced air, a form of transportation Strange recognized as apparition. Impressive words, Doctor. Dumbledore commented, looking around with evident curiosity. Few locations permit direct apparition through their protections. I take it this was intentional. A calculated exception. Strange confirmed, descending the stairs to greet his visitor. Though only for today, and only for you. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled behind half-moon spectacles. He cut an eccentric figure even by sorcerer standards, resplendent in flowing purple robes patterned with silver stars, his white beard long enough to tuck into his belt. Yet Strange sensed the power beneath the whimsical exterior, old magic, deeply rooted and formidable. "Where is young Harry?" Dumbledore asked, glancing around the entrance hall. "Reading in the library. Wong is keeping him company." Strange gestured toward his study. "I thought we might speak privately first." Dumbledore inclined his head in agreement, following Strange to a book-lined room dominated by a large desk. Strange offered his visitor a seat before taking his own. "I must admit," Dumbledore began, "your message came as quite a shock. The wards at Privet Drive showed no breach, yet you extracted Harry without triggering them. They didn't register me as a threat," Strange explained. "My intentions toward Harry were protective, not harmful." He leaned forward. "More concerning is how weakened those wards had become. You place great faith in the power of blood, Headmaster. Blood magic is ancient and powerful," Dumbledore countered. "Lily Potter's sacrifice created protection that has kept Harry safe from Voldemort's followers for 8 years. At what cost?" Strange's voice hardened slightly. "The boy was sleeping in a cupboard, Dumbledore. Underfed, clothed in rags, punished for accidental magic he couldn't control." Dumbledore's eyes lost their twinkle, genuine remorse crossing his features. "I feared they might not treat him as their own, but I never imagined." He sighed heavily. "I had monitoring charms, of course, but they were calibrated for magical threats, not—" He trailed off. "Not mundane cruelty," Strange finished. "Which brings us to our current situation. Harry cannot return there." "On that we agree," Dumbledore said solemnly. "Though it creates considerable complications. The blood protection was our strongest defense against those who would harm him. Then we create new protections," Strange said simply. "Between your expertise and mine, surely we can devise something adequate." Dumbledore stroked his beard thoughtfully. "You propose to keep him here? At your sanctum?" "I do. I've already begun teaching him basic control techniques. His magic is unusually strong, Headmaster, and manifesting in ways that bridge our traditions." "Yes, about that." Dumbledore's gaze sharpened. "Your magical tradition is unknown to our ministry. They'll have questions about your interference with a wizarding child, particularly this wizarding child." Strange smiled thinly. "I answer to the Vishanti, not your Ministry of Magic. But I understand the political sensitivities. I propose a compromise." "I'm listening," Dumbledore said. "Harry remains under my protection until he begins at Hogwarts. I train him in basic control and the fundamental principles of both magical systems. You provide appropriate wizarding education materials and visit regularly to monitor his progress. When he turns 11, he receives his Hogwarts letter like any other student." Dumbledore considered this. "And the blood protection?" "We replace it with something stronger," Strange said confidently. "A multilayered defense drawing from both our traditions. I've been researching options since last night." The old wizard nodded slowly. "It could work. Though I must insist that Harry maintain connections to the wizarding world. His parents left him a considerable legacy, both material and cultural." "Agreed," Strange said. "Which is why I hoped you might suggest appropriate wizarding contacts, people who knew his parents and can share memories of them. Remus Lupin comes to mind," Dumbledore mused. "A close friend of James Potter. And perhaps occasional visits to the Weasley family. They have a son Harry's age who will attend Hogwarts with him." Their negotiation continued for nearly an hour, hammering out details of Harry's unusual arrangement. Finally, Dumbledore sat back. "I believe we have an accord, Dr. Strange. Unusual as it may be." His eyes twinkled again. "I must admit, I'm curious to see how exposure to your magical tradition influences Harry's development. Cross-cultural magical education is vanishingly rare. Then shall we include Harry in our discussion? Strange suggested, rising from his seat. I'm sure he has questions for both of us. Minutes later, Harry entered the study, eyes wide as he took in Dumbledore's eccentric appearance. The headmaster stood, smiling warmly. Harry Potter, he said gently. How wonderful to see you again, though you wouldn't remember our last meeting. You were just a baby then. You knew me as a baby, sir? Harry asked, taking the seat Strange indicated. Indeed. I was the one who brought you to your aunt and uncle's home after your parents' death. Regret flashed across Dumbledore's features. A decision I now see was flawed, despite my good intentions. Harry fidgeted with his glasses. Dr. Strange says I don't have to go back there. That is correct, Dumbledore confirmed. Dr. Strange and I have reached an agreement about your future care and magical education. Relief washed over Harry's face. So I'll stay here? At the Sanctum? Yes, Strange said. You'll live and train here until you're ready to attend Hogwarts at 11. Professor Dumbledore will visit regularly, and you'll have opportunities to meet others from the wizarding world, including people who knew your parents. Harry's eyes brightened. Really? People who can tell me about them? Many people, Dumbledore assured him. Your parents were well loved, Harry. They had many friends who would be delighted to share their memories with you. Harry nodded, then hesitated. Sir, Dr. Strange told me about Voldemort. About what happened to my parents. Dumbledore's expression grew solemn. Did he indeed? The boy deserves truth, not mythology, Strange said unapologetically. I agree, Dumbledore said, surprising both of them. Though truth is sometimes complex, and best delivered in measures appropriate to one's age and understanding. He turned back to Harry. What questions do you have, my boy? I'll answer as honestly as I can. Harry took a deep breath. Why did he want to kill me? I was just a baby. Dumbledore exchanged a look with Strange. That is perhaps the most important question, and one with an answer too complex for today. I promise that when you're a bit older, I will explain fully. Harry looked disappointed but nodded. Is he really gone? Voldemort? No, Dumbledore said quietly. I believe he was greatly weakened, reduced to something barely alive, but not destroyed completely. Which is why your protection remains important. Harry absorbed this soberly. And that's why I need to learn magic? To protect myself? That, Strange interjected. And because it's your birthright. Magic is part of who you are, Harry, not just a tool for defense. Dumbledore nodded approvingly. Well said, Doctor. Magic is indeed a gift to be celebrated and explored, not merely weaponized. He reached into his robes and withdrew a slender wooden stick. Which reminds me. He placed the wand on the desk before Harry. This is not your wand, that you will select yourself when the time comes. But it's a training wand that will help you learn basic wizarding spells under Dr. Strange's supervision. Harry reached for it hesitantly, eyes wide with wonder. As his fingers closed around the polished wood, a shower of red and gold sparks erupted from its tip. Oh! Harry exclaimed, nearly dropping it in surprise. Dumbledore chuckled. Even a training wand recognizes potential. Most encouraging. The meeting continued for another hour, with Dumbledore explaining more about Hogwarts and the wizarding world. By the time he prepared to depart, Harry's head was swimming with new information, but his eyes shone with excitement. I shall return next week with some beginning magical texts and perhaps Mr. Lupin, if he's available, Dumbledore said, rising to his feet. Until then, Harry, I suggest you focus on the fundamentals Dr. Strange is teaching you. Control and discipline form the foundation of all magical practice. After Dumbledore's departure, Harry turned to Strange, practically vibrating with energy despite the long day. Can we practice more now? Please? Strange smiled, reminded of his own eagerness when first discovering magic. A short session before dinner. But remember, magic requires balance. Pushing too hard too quickly leads to mistakes. As they returned to the training room, Strange reflected on the path ahead. He'd taken on an unprecedented responsibility, bridging two magical worlds through one extraordinary boy. The coming months would bring challenges from both traditions as news of their arrangement spread. Yet watching Harry's face light up as he successfully cast his first controlled spell, a simple light charm with the training wand, Strange knew he'd made the right decision. This boy had suffered enough in darkness. It was time he learned to create his own light. In the months that followed, Harry's life transformed beyond recognition. The Sanctum became home in a way Privet Drive never had, a place of wonder, learning, and for the first time, belonging. Each day followed a structured routine. Mornings began with meditation and physical training to strengthen both body and magical control. Afternoons alternated between sorcery practice with Strange and wizarding studies with whatever materials Dumbledore provided. Evenings were for reading, relaxation, and occasional excursions into New York City, where Harry marveled at the mundane wonders of a world he'd never been allowed to explore. True to his word, Dumbledore arranged visitors from the wizarding world. The first was Remus Lupin, a prematurely aged man with kind eyes and shabby robes who had been one of James Potter's closest friends. His first meeting with Harry reduced both to tears, Lupin overcome by Harry's resemblance to his parents, and Harry hungry for every story the man could share. "Your father could transform into a stag," Lupin told him during one visit. "A rare magical talent called an animagus. And your mother, she had an extraordinary gift for charms and potions." Harry absorbed these details like a sponge, building mental images of the parents he couldn't remember. Photographs helped. Lupin had brought albums that showed James and Lily waving and smiling, moving within their frames in a way that still amazed Harry despite all the magic he'd witnessed. Strange observed these visits with quiet approval. The boy needed connections to both worlds, the one he'd been born into and the one he now inhabited. Wong, too, had taken a liking to Harry, teaching him about magical artifacts and occasionally sneaking him forbidden sweets when Strange wasn't looking. On a crisp October morning, nearly 6 months after Harry's arrival at the Sanctum, Strange found him in the library, surrounded by books on both wizarding and mystic magical theory. "Attempting to reconcile dimensional energy manipulation with core-channeled spellcasting?" Strange asked, noting the titles. Harry looked up with a grin. "I think they're more compatible than everyone believes. Look at this." He pointed to diagrams in 2 different books, one showing the movement of a wizarding charm, the other illustrating a mystic arts gesture. "They're almost identical in pattern, just with different focuses." Strange examined the comparison with raised eyebrows. "Insightful observation. The fundamental energies are the same, it's the access methods that differ. So theoretically," Harry continued excitedly, "I could combine them? Use sorcery forms to enhance wizarding spells?" "Theoretically," Strange agreed cautiously. "Though I'd advise against experimentation without supervision. Magical hybridization can have unpredictable results." Too late. Harry had already made the mystic gesture while holding his training wand and whispering, "Lumos." Instead of the standard soft light at the wand tip, a brilliant sphere of illumination exploded outward, temporarily blinding them both. "Sorry!" Harry yelped as the light faded, leaving dancing spots in their vision. Strange blinked rapidly. "That," he said dryly, "is exactly why we don't experiment without supervision." But there was no real reproach in his voice. Harry's progress had been remarkable, not just in magical skill but in confidence and happiness. The nervous, malnourished boy from Privet Drive was gone, replaced by a curious, energetic child who embraced his magical heritage with enthusiasm. "I've been meaning to discuss something with you," Strange said, taking a seat beside Harry. "Your birthday is approaching." "In July," Harry confirmed. "That's months away." "Your 10th birthday," Strange emphasized. "Which means Hogwarts is just over a year away. We need to prepare you for reintegration with the wizarding world, including some public appearances." Harry's expression fell slightly. Because I'm the boy who lived? Because you're Harry Potter, Strange corrected gently. A young wizard who will soon join his peers at school. It would be easier if you weren't a complete mystery to them. Harry nodded thoughtfully. I suppose that makes sense. What did you have in mind? Dumbledore suggests a visit to Diagon Alley, the wizarding shopping district in London. Limited exposure, carefully monitored, but enough to reintroduce you to that world. Will you come with me? Harry asked, a hint of his old insecurity showing through. Strange nodded. Of course. Though I may attract almost as much attention as you, given the unusual nature of my magic. Harry grinned. We'll be mysterious together, then. The planned excursion never happened. 2 days later, as Harry practiced advanced levitation in the training room, Wong burst in with uncharacteristic urgency. Strange needs you in the foyer. Now. Harry set down the objects he'd been floating and hurried after Wong. In the Sanctum's entrance hall, he found Strange facing off with a stern-looking woman in formal robes and a tall pointed hat. Behind her stood 2 men in uniforms Harry didn't recognize. Absolutely unprecedented. The woman was saying, no documentation, no ministry approval, and consorting with Muggle sorcerers. Albus has overstepped his authority considerably. Harry, Strange said calmly, noticing his arrival. This is Minister Millicent Bagnold of the British Ministry of Magic. Minister, Harry Potter. The woman's severe expression softened slightly as she turned to Harry. Mr. Potter. I'm pleased to see you looking well, though concerned about the irregularity of your current situation. Harry moved closer to Strange, instantly wary. I'm happy here, Minister. Dr. Strange is teaching me control. I'm sure he is, she replied diplomatically. But there are protocols for magical guardianship, especially for a child of your prominence. Strange's expression remained neutral. As I was explaining, Minister, Harry's placement here was approved by Albus Dumbledore, acting as his magical guardian after discovering the unsuitability of his previous living situation. Dumbledore is not the ministry. One of the uniformed men muttered. Indeed not. Bagnold agreed. Which is why I must insist on a formal review of this arrangement. The boy who lived cannot simply disappear into the custody of an unaffiliated magical practitioner unknown to our records. Harry felt panic rising. They wanted to take him away, place him with strangers again. His magic responded instinctively, objects around the foyer beginning to tremble. Strange placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. Control, Harry, he murmured. Then, to the minister, perhaps we could discuss this privately? Harry, why don't you continue your practice with Wong? Harry hesitated, reluctant to leave when his future hung in the balance. But trust me, Strange said quietly. No one will take you anywhere against your will. You have my word. Reluctantly, Harry allowed Wong to lead him back to the training room, though his concentration was shot for the remainder of the day. When Strange finally joined them hours later, his expression was weary but satisfied. Well? Harry asked anxiously. Politics, Strange sighed, are exhausting in any magical tradition. He smiled tiredly. But we've reached a compromise. You'll remain here under my primary guardianship, with Dumbledore as your official wizarding guardian on record. The ministry will send an observer periodically to monitor your wizarding education. Relief flooded through Harry. So I can stay? You can stay, Strange confirmed. Though we'll need to make a formal appearance at the ministry next month to sign documents and satisfy protocol. That night, lying in bed, Harry reflected on how dramatically his life had changed in half a year. From unwanted burden to magical apprentice. From isolation to belonging. From a cupboard under the stairs to a sanctuary filled with wonders. Most importantly, from a boy who believed he was nothing special to one who understood he was unique, not just because of a famous scar, but because he stood at the crossroads of 2 magical traditions, with the potential to bridge worlds that had remained separate for centuries. As sleep claimed him, Harry's last conscious thought was one of gratitude that Dr. Strange had found him that night, and of determination to prove worthy of the faith placed in him. Chapter 2, The Convergence Harry's 10th birthday dawned clear and bright, summer sunlight streaming through the enchanted windows of his bedroom at the Sanctum. The magical windows could show any view he desired. Today they displayed the grounds of his parents' former home in Godric's Hollow, reconstructed from photographs Remus had provided. Harry often woke to different vistas, a way of connecting to a world he was still learning about. He dressed quickly, excitement bubbling through him. Dr. Strange had promised something special for his birthday, though he'd been characteristically cryptic about the details. The past 9 months at the Sanctum had taught Harry that surprises here could range from meeting ancient mystical entities to discovering hidden rooms that defied physical laws. The scent of breakfast lured him downstairs, where he found Wong in the kitchen, orchestrating a feast that would have made Aunt Petunia faint with envy. "Happy birthday, young Potter," Wong said, his usually stern expression softened by a slight smile. "Thanks, Wong." Harry grinned, eyeing the towering stack of pancakes. "Where's Dr. Strange?" "Concluding some business in the mirror dimension. He asked that you eat and then meet him in the artifacts chamber." Wong slid a plate piled high with pancakes toward him. "Fuel for what promises to be an eventful day." Harry dug in, having long since abandoned the tentative eating habits formed at the Dursleys. As he ate, his mind wandered over the past year's remarkable journey. From frightened, confused child to apprentice in 2 magical traditions. His control had grown exponentially. No more accidental magical surges. No more objects mysteriously shattering when he felt strong emotions. Instead, he could now channel both his innate wizarding core and external dimensional energies with increasing precision. The training wand Dumbledore had provided responded to him almost as eagerly as his bare hands did when shaping mystic arts spells. Strange had expressed both pride and concern about Harry's unusual dual affinity, particularly his tendency to unconsciously blend the 2 systems. "The boundaries between magical traditions exist for a reason, Harry," Strange had cautioned after a particularly creative experiment had temporarily transformed the training room into a pocket dimension filled with singing teacups. "Not because either is superior, but because their fundamental approaches differ. Like oil and water, both useful, but potentially volatile when forcibly mixed." Harry had nodded seriously, then promptly continued his experiments when Strange wasn't looking. The results were unpredictable but fascinating. Wizarding spells amplified by sorcery gestures, potion ingredients reacting to dimensional energy manipulations in ways that made Wong's eyebrows disappear for 3 days. After breakfast, Harry made his way to the artifacts chamber, a room normally kept locked, housing magical objects too powerful or unpredictable for casual handling. Strange stood at its center, the eye of Agamotto gleaming against his blue robes. "Happy birthday, Harry," Strange said with a warm smile. "Thank you, sir." Harry looked around curiously. "Wong said you wanted to see me here?" Strange nodded. 10 is a significant age for a young sorcerer, and a wizard. In many magical traditions, it marks the transition from basic training to more advanced studies. He gestured toward a wooden cabinet that hadn't been there the day before. "This contains your birthday gifts, from myself, from Wong, and from several of your Wizarding World contacts." Harry approached the cabinet eagerly, but Strange held up a hand. "Before you open it, I want you to understand something important. With greater knowledge comes greater responsibility. The next phase of your training will involve more dangerous magic, more complex spellwork. Are you prepared for that?" Harry straightened, sensing the seriousness of the moment. "I am, sir." Strange studied him for a moment, then nodded in satisfaction. "Then open the cabinet." The doors swung open at Harry's touch. Inside lay several wrapped packages of various sizes, but what immediately caught his eye was a gleaming silver pendant on a chain. It appeared to be a perfect miniature replica of the Eye of Agamotto. "This is my gift to you," Strange said, lifting the pendant. "Not merely jewelry, but a focusing tool designed specifically for your unique magical signature." He placed it around Harry's neck. The pendant felt warm against Harry's skin, pulsing slightly like a second heartbeat. "It will help stabilize the confluence of your 2 magical systems," Strange explained, "and provide protection against those who might sense your power and mean you harm." Harry touched the pendant reverently. It's brilliant. Thank you. The other gifts await your attention, Strange prompted with a small smile. Harry turned back to the cabinet. From Wong, he received a set of ancient scrolls containing beginner-level spells from the mystical traditions of Eastern sorcery. To broaden your perspective, the normally taciturn librarian had written in the accompanying note. Remus Lupin had sent a photo album filled with moving pictures of Harry's parents during their Hogwarts years, James on a broomstick, Lily laughing by the lake, both of them dancing at their wedding. Tears pricked Harry's eyes as he leafed through it. From Dumbledore came an exquisite traveling chest set with pieces carved from ivory and ebony. To cultivate strategic thinking, the headmaster's note read. A skill valuable in both magic and life. The final package contained a gleaming golden key with an accompanying letter from Gringotts Wizarding Bank, informing Harry that he now had supervised access to his family vault. I thought it appropriate that you begin to connect with your heritage, Strange explained. Dumbledore arranged for a visit to Diagon Alley next week, where you can see the Wizarding Bank and access some of your parents' belongings. Harry looked up from the gifts, momentarily overwhelmed. This is the best birthday I've ever had. Strange smiled. The day is young. After you've properly admired your gifts, I thought we might take a special excursion. Where to? Harry asked eagerly. Convergence, Strange replied. The primary training grounds for the masters of the mystic arts. It's time you saw the birthplace of the traditions you've been learning. Harry's eyes widened. He'd heard countless stories about the hidden compound in Kathmandu, but Strange had always said he wasn't ready to visit. Really? Today? Unless you'd prefer to stay and practice levitation drills, Strange said with a hint of amusement. Harry was already on his feet. When do we leave? An hour later, Harry stepped through a portal onto ancient stones worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. Before him stretched a courtyard surrounded by wooden buildings that somehow seemed both ancient and timeless. Convergence, the hidden heart of the mystic arts. Students in simple robes practiced forms and synchronized movements. Masters demonstrated spells that bent light and reality. The air itself seemed charged with mystical energy. Welcome to where it began for me, Strange said quietly, guiding Harry through the courtyard. It's amazing, Harry breathed, trying to absorb every detail. How old is this place? The buildings have been rebuilt many times over the centuries, Strange replied. But the school itself? Its origins are lost to time. The Ancient One guided it for centuries before me. They passed through a series of courtyards and hallways, Strange occasionally stopping to introduce Harry to other sorcerers. Many regarded the boy with undisguised curiosity. Your reputation precedes you, Strange explained as they continued. A child proficient in both wizarding magic and the mystic arts is unprecedented. Is that bad? Harry asked, noting some of the more skeptical glances. Different, Strange corrected. And different can be threatening to those invested in traditional ways. A lesson you'll encounter often, I suspect. Their tour culminated in a vast library that made even the Sanctum's collection seem modest. Ancient tomes lined shelves that reached to vaulted ceilings. Some books floated in midair, pages turning themselves. Others were chained shut, faint sounds emanating from behind their covers. The repository of mystical knowledge, Strange said. Texts from every magical tradition known to our order. Harry approached a section where several books seemed to be written in strange, shifting symbols. I can't read this, he said, fascinated. The letters keep changing. Some knowledge reveals itself only to those ready to receive it, Strange explained. Those texts are written in the language of the Vishanti. They appear differently to each reader, based on their magical development and need. Harry was about to ask more when a new voice interrupted. So this is the famous hybrid apprentice. They turned to see a dark-skinned man with intense eyes and a rigid posture. Unlike Strange's more elaborate attire, he wore simple green robes, though power radiated from him in palpable waves. Carl, Strange greeted him, his tone carefully neutral. I was hoping we might see you today. Were you? The man raised an eyebrow, his gaze fixed on Harry. I thought perhaps you were avoiding introducing your experiment to those who might question its wisdom. Harry bristled at being called an experiment, but Strange placed a calming hand on his shoulder. Harry, this is Master Carl Mordo, one of the Convergence's most accomplished sorcerers and my former training partner. Mordo, this is Harry Potter. Harry extended his hand politely. Pleased to meet you, Master Mordo. Mordo regarded the outstretched hand for a moment before briefly clasping it. The boy has manners, at least. Strange, a word in private? Strange nodded. Harry, the courtyard through that door contains a reflecting pool. It's tradition for first-time visitors to cast a pebble and observe the ripples. I'll join you shortly. Harry recognized the dismissal when he heard one. With a last curious glance at the stern Master Mordo, he made his way to the indicated courtyard. The reflecting pool was beautiful, a perfect circle of still water surrounded by smooth stones. Harry selected a small pebble and tossed it gently. The ripples spread outward in perfect concentric circles until, strangely, they began to form patterns, shapes that seemed almost like letters before dissolving back into random movement. It shows differently to everyone. Harry turned to find a girl about his age watching him. She had dark skin, intelligent eyes, and hair pulled back in neat rows of braids. What does it mean? He asked. She shrugged. The masters say it reflects potential futures, but never clearly enough to rely upon. She studied him curiously. You're him, aren't you? The boy who can do both kinds of magic? Harry nodded, somewhat uncomfortable with her direct assessment. I'm Harry. Tara, she replied. Master Mince's apprentice. She gestured at his pendant. That's a powerful artifact for someone our age. It was a birthday gift, Harry explained. From Dr. Strange. Tara's eyes widened slightly. The Sorcerer Supreme doesn't give gifts lightly. She cocked her head, regarding him with renewed interest. Would you show me some of your wizard magic? I've only ever seen mystic arts. Harry hesitated. I'm not supposed to do wizard magic outside the sanctum without permission. Just something small. She pressed. I'll show you a Tibetan protection charm in exchange. Before Harry could respond, footsteps sounded on the stone path. Strange appeared, his expression unreadable. Making friends already, I see, he commented. Tara bowed respectfully. Sorcerer Supreme. Apprentice Tara. Strange nodded. If Master Mince permits, perhaps you can continue this conversation over lunch. Harry will be visiting more regularly in the coming months. Tara brightened. I'll ask him, sir. With another quick bow, she hurried off. Is everything all right? Harry asked once they were alone. Master Mordo seemed upset. Strange sighed. Mordo has strong views on magical tradition. He believes each magical system should remain separate, that combining them risks upsetting natural balances. Is he right? Harry asked, suddenly worried. He's not wrong to be cautious. Strange replied carefully. But magical knowledge has always evolved through exploration and discovery. The key is proceeding with wisdom, not fear. He placed a hand on Harry's shoulder. Which is why your training must intensify before you begin at Hogwarts. You'll need discipline to navigate between these worlds. They spent the remainder of the day at Convergence. Harry met with other masters, observed advanced students practicing reality warping spells, and even participated in a beginner's class on dimensional energy manipulation. By the time they returned to the sanctum that evening, his mind was buzzing with new ideas and questions. Did you enjoy your birthday, Harry? Strange asked as they stepped through the portal into the familiar surroundings of the sanctum. It was brilliant, Harry replied sincerely. Thank you for everything, the pendant, Convergence, all of it. Strange smiled. Get some rest. Your training schedule intensifies tomorrow. As Harry turned to go, Strange added, And Harry? Remember what I said about magical boundaries. I noticed you and Tara conspiring to exchange demonstrations. Harry flushed. We weren't going to do anything dangerous. Perhaps not intentionally. Strange said mildly. But as you've discovered, even simple spells can have unexpected results when magical traditions intersect? Harry nodded, properly chastened. Yes, sir. Good night. Good night, Harry. Happy birthday. The following months passed in a blur of intensive training. True to his word, Strange increased both the difficulty and frequency of Harry's lessons. Mornings now began before dawn with physical training, martial arts forms that Strange insisted were crucial for developing the body's magical channels. Afternoons were devoted to increasingly complex spell work in both traditions. Harry's wizarding education continued through a combination of correspondence lessons arranged by Dumbledore and periodic visits from wizarding tutors. Professor McGonagall, the stern but fair Transfiguration teacher from Hogwarts, visited monthly to assess his progress with the training wand. Your wand work shows promise, Mr. Potter, she observed during one session. Though your gestures occasionally deviate from standard form. Her eyes narrowed. Almost as if you're incorporating some other magical system. Harry tried to look innocent. Just trying to find what feels natural, Professor. McGonagall's lips thinned. Magic isn't about what feels natural, Mr. Potter. It's about precision and discipline. With respect, Minerva. Strange interjected from where he observed nearby. Many magical traditions would disagree. Intent and intuition play crucial roles in spell casting. Perhaps in your traditions, Doctor, McGonagall replied crisply. But Mr. Potter will be expected to perform standard wizarding spells at Hogwarts, not hybrid experiments. The tension between traditional wizarding instruction and Strange's more fluid approach to magic became a constant theme. Harry often felt caught between worlds, excelling in both but fully belonging to either. His pendant helped stabilize the increasingly powerful results of his magical practice, but even Strange sometimes looked concerned at the ease with which Harry blended the two systems. Your natural affinity for magic is remarkable, Strange told him after a particularly impressive demonstration where Harry had combined a levitation charm with mystic arts shields. But power without control is just chaos. Harry finished, having heard the maxim countless times. I am being careful, sir. Strange studied him. Are you? Last week's incident with the dimensional pocket was an accident. Harry protested. I didn't know the Transfiguration would interact that way with the mirror dimension access point. Precisely my concern, Strange said seriously. We're in uncharted territory, Harry. Your capacity to innovate is extraordinary, but the consequences of a serious magical mishap could be dire. Harry nodded soberly. Strange rarely delivered such direct warnings, which made them all the more impactful when he did. Winter melted into spring, and spring blossomed into summer. As Harry's 11th birthday approached, anticipation filled the Sanctum. The Hogwarts letter would arrive soon, marking the next phase of his unusual educational journey. Will I still be able to practice the mystic arts at Hogwarts? Harry asked one evening as he and Strange reviewed dimensional portal theory. We're still negotiating those details, Strange replied. Hogwarts has extensive magical protections that might interact unpredictably with certain mystic arts spells. Dumbledore is working on creating a designated area where you can safely practice. Harry frowned. So I'll have to keep the sorcery secret? Not secret, precisely, Strange said carefully, but discreet. The wizarding world is generally unaware of our order and our approach to magic. Some might find it threatening. Like Master Mordo finds wizard magic threatening? Harry asked perceptively. Strange's mouth quirked in a half-smile. Perspective is a powerful force, Harry. Remember that when you encounter resistance from either tradition. July 31st dawned bright and clear. Harry woke early, sensing the day's significance. His 11th birthday, the day that would formalize his entry into the wizarding world he'd been learning about for nearly 2 years. He'd barely finished breakfast when a tawny owl swooped through the special opening Strange had created in the Sanctum's formidable defenses. The bird dropped an envelope of thick, yellowish parchment directly onto Harry's plate before perching on the back of an empty chair. The address was written in emerald green ink: Mr. H. Potter, the Eastern Chamber, Sanctum Sanctorum 177A, Bleecker Street, New York City. With trembling fingers, Harry broke the purple wax seal bearing the Hogwarts crest and unfolded the letter inside. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Headmaster Albus Dumbledore, Order of Merlin, First Class, Grand Source, CHF, Warlock, Supreme Mugwump, International Confeed of Wizards. Dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find enclosed a list of all necessary books and equipment. Term begins on September 1st. We await your owl by no later than July 31st. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress. A second page listed required supplies, robes, books, a cauldron, and most importantly, a wand. It's official, Harry said, looking up at Strange with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. I'm going to Hogwarts. Strange nodded, a hint of something like pride in his expression. Indeed you are. But first, we have preparations to make. Diagon Alley awaits. Later that morning, a portal opened in the Sanctum's foyer, revealing not the magical shopping district, but the austere office of Albus Dumbledore at Hogwarts. The elderly wizard rose from behind his desk, smiling warmly as Strange and Harry stepped through. Happy birthday, Harry! Dumbledore greeted him. And congratulations on your official acceptance to Hogwarts. Thank you, Headmaster, Harry replied, unable to contain his grin. I thought it best we coordinate our arrival in Diagon Alley, Strange explained. Harry's first public appearance in the wizarding world will attract attention. Dumbledore nodded gravely. Indeed. Which is why I've arranged a specific time with certain shopkeepers. We'll avoid the worst of the crowds while ensuring Harry gets properly fitted for everything he needs. He peered at Harry over his half-moon spectacles. Are you prepared for the attention, my boy? You've been sheltered from your fame these past 2 years. Harry unconsciously touched the pendant beneath his shirt. I think so, sir. Dr. Strange has been preparing me for it. We've practiced meditation techniques for maintaining calm under scrutiny, Strange confirmed. And basic magical shielding, should it become necessary. Let us hope it doesn't, Dumbledore said. Well then, shall we proceed? Hagrid is waiting to meet us at the Leaky Cauldron. Another portal, this one conjured by Dumbledore rather than Strange, transported them to a small courtyard behind an unremarkable pub. The headmaster tapped a specific pattern on the brick wall with his wand, and the bricks rearranged themselves to form an archway. Welcome, Harry, Dumbledore said with a theatrical gesture, to Diagon Alley. The sight that greeted them took Harry's breath away. A winding cobblestone street stretched before them, lined with the most extraordinary shops he'd ever seen. Cauldrons of every size stacked outside an apothecary, owls hooted from the darkened windows of a magical menagerie, and robed figures hurried about their shopping. Blimey, there ye are! Boomed an enormous voice. A giant of a man with a wild black beard stood waiting just inside the archway. His beaming smile was visible even through the tangled facial hair. Harry! He exclaimed. Last time I saw you, you was just a baby. Look like your dad, you do, but with your mum's eyes. Harry, this is Rubeus Hagrid, keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts. Dumbledore introduced them. And one of the people who helped bring you to safety after your parents' passing. It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Hagrid, Harry said, extending his hand and having it completely engulfed in the giant man's grip. Just Hagrid, everyone calls me Hagrid, he insisted, eyes suspiciously bright. Can't believe how you've grown. And trained by a real sorcerer too. Dumbledore tells me you've been learning all sorts o' unusual magic. Strange stepped forward. Dr. Stephen Strange. He introduced himself. Harry has been an exceptional student. Hagrid regarded Strange with open curiosity. Never met one o' your sort before. Different kind o' magic altogether, I hear. Similar sources, different approaches. Strange replied diplomatically. Their conversation was interrupted as a young witch passing by did a double take, staring at Harry with widening eyes. It's him, she gasped. Harry Potter. Within moments, a small crowd began to gather. People whispered and pointed, some pushing forward to shake Harry's hand or touch his robes. Harry maintained his composure admirably, though Strange noticed his hand drift toward the hidden pendant. "Perhaps we should continue to Gringotts," Dumbledore suggested, smoothly inserting himself between Harry and the growing crowd. "Much to purchase, very little time." The imposing white marble building of Gringotts Wizarding Bank provided temporary sanctuary from the attention. Inside, after a hair-raising cart ride to the Potter family vault, Harry stood amazed at the piles of gold, silver, and bronze coins, his inheritance, preserved all these years. "Your father came from an old wizarding family," Dumbledore explained as Harry filled a small bag with coins. "This is but a trust vault. The main Potter family vault will become accessible to you when you come of age." Beyond the money, Harry discovered a small collection of personal items, jewelry that had belonged to his mother, magical instruments his father had used, and a sealed letter addressed simply to Harry on his 11th birthday. With trembling fingers, he broke the seal and unfolded the parchment. "My dearest Harry, if you're reading this, then your father and I are gone, but you have survived. I pray you've had a happy childhood with people who love you, though I fear what's coming. On your 11th birthday, as you prepare for Hogwarts, I want you to know how incredibly proud we are of you. Whatever path you choose, whatever magic calls to you, know that you carry our love with you always. Trust your heart, but guard it well. Not all who smile are friends, and not all who challenge you are foes. With all my love, Mum." Harry brushed away tears, carefully folding the letter and tucking it into his pocket. Strange pretended not to notice, examining a curious golden instrument nearby to give the boy privacy with his mother's words. The shopping expedition continued with stops at Madame Malkin's for robes, Flourish and Blots for schoolbooks, and the apothecary for potion supplies. Everywhere they went, whispers followed. "It's Harry Potter. Where has he been all this time? Who's that strange man with him? Not a wizard by his clothes. They say he's been learning foreign magic." Harry handled the attention with remarkable poise, though Strange could sense his relief whenever they entered another shop and escaped the public eye. "Just the one left now," Hagrid announced cheerfully as they exited the bookstore, Harry's arms laden with packages. "Actually," Strange interjected, "I believe I see an acquaintance Harry should meet before that." He nodded toward Florian Fortescue's ice cream parlor, where a family with bushy-haired girls sat enjoying enormous sundaes. "The Grangers," Dumbledore noted with a smile. "Excellent suggestion, Stephen." They approached the table, where the girl looked up from her book, Advanced Magical Theory, Harry noted with surprise, and her eyes widened in recognition. "Professor Dumbledore!" she exclaimed, then glanced curiously at Harry and Strange. "Miss Granger," Dumbledore greeted her warmly. "Enjoying your introduction to the wizarding world, I see. May I introduce Harry Potter, who will be joining you as a first-year student this September? And his guardian, Dr. Stephen Strange." The girl's parents looked bemused but pleased as introductions were made all around. Hermione Granger, it turned out, was also 11, Muggle-born, and had only learned about magic when Professor McGonagall delivered her Hogwarts letter a month earlier. "I've been reading everything I can find about the wizarding world," she explained eagerly. "It's all so fascinating. I've already memorized all our course books, of course. I just hope it will be enough." Harry grinned. "I'm sure you'll do brilliantly. You're really him, aren't you?" she asked, lowering her voice. "Harry Potter? I've read about you in modern magical history and the rise and fall of the dark arts." Yes," Harry replied awkwardly. "Though I expect those books got a lot wrong. They do say you disappeared from the wizarding world," she said thoughtfully. "But they didn't mention anything about—" She glanced at Strange. "An education in the mystic arts?" Strange supplied with a small smile. "It's not widely known." Hermione's eyes lit with interest. "Mystic arts? Is that different from the magic we'll learn at Hogwarts? Is there a book about it? Can anyone learn it?" Harry laughed. "You really do like to read, don't you? Knowledge is power." She replied promptly, then blushed. That sounds pretentious, doesn't it? But I just find it all so interesting. Maybe we can exchange notes at Hogwarts, Harry suggested. I've been studying both systems. They're different but complementary. I'd like that, Hermione said, looking genuinely pleased. After promising to look for each other on the Hogwarts Express, they continued to their final destination, Ollivander's wand shop. The narrow, dusty store seemed to hum with magical energy as they entered. An old man with wide, pale eyes appeared from between the towering shelves of wand boxes. I wondered when I'd be seeing you, Mr. Potter, he said softly. And in such unusual company. The Sorcerer Supreme himself. Strange inclined his head slightly. Mr. Ollivander. You know each other? Harry asked, surprised. We've never met, Strange replied. But reputation often precedes actual introduction in magical circles. Indeed, Ollivander agreed, his silver eyes fixed unnervingly on Harry. And now, Mr. Potter, let us find your wand. Or rather, let the wand find you. What followed was a lengthy process of trial and error. Wand after wand was placed in Harry's hand, only to be snatched away before he could do more than wave it once. Tricky customer, Ollivander murmured, seeming more excited with each failure. But not to worry, we'll find your perfect match. He paused, then pulled out a dusty box from a far corner. I wonder, yes, why not? Unusual combination, but then you are an unusual case. The wand he presented was holly, 11 inches, with a phoenix feather core. The moment Harry's fingers closed around it, warmth spread up his arm. He raised it and brought it swishing down through the air, producing a stream of red and gold sparks that danced like fireworks. Dumbledore clapped, Hagrid whooped, and even Strange looked impressed. Ollivander, however, appeared thoughtful. Curious, he murmured. Very curious. Sorry, Harry said. But what's curious? I remember every wand I've ever sold, Mr. Potter. Every single wand. It so happens that the phoenix whose tail feather is in your wand gave just one other feather. Just one. It is very curious indeed that you should be destined for this wand when its brother, why, its brother gave you that scar. A chill ran down Harry's spine. Voldemort's wand? The very same. Ollivander confirmed, seemingly unperturbed by Harry's use of the name. The wand chooses the wizard, Mr. Potter. I think we must expect great things from you. After all, he who must not be named did great things, terrible, yes, but great. Strange stepped forward, subtly positioning himself between Harry and the wand-maker. Thank you for your assistance, Mr. Ollivander. How much do we owe you for the wand? After paying 7 galleons for the wand, they exited the shop. Harry remained quiet, contemplating the connection between his wand and Voldemort's. Does it mean something? He finally asked as they made their way back toward the leaky cauldron. Having brother wands? It means magic recognized a connection that already existed. Dumbledore replied gently. But it does not define you, Harry, any more than your scar does. The wand is a tool, not a destiny. Strange added. Remember your mother's words. Trust your heart, but guard it well. Harry nodded, touching the letter in his pocket. I just hope I'm ready for all this. You have been preparing for 2 years. Strange reminded him. And you won't face it alone. Their shopping complete, they bid farewell to Hagrid, who engulfed Harry in another bone-crushing hug. See ya at Hogwarts, Harry. As they prepared to depart, a familiar voice called out. Potter! Dr. Strange. They turned to see Minister Bagnold approaching, accompanied by a young man in official-looking robes. Minister. Dumbledore greeted her. What a pleasant surprise. Hardly a surprise, Albus, she replied dryly. The appearance of the boy who lived in Diagon Alley could hardly go unnoticed by the ministry. She turned to Harry. Mr. Potter, welcome back to the wizarding world. I trust you found everything you need for Hogwarts? Yes, Minister, Harry replied politely. Thank you. And Dr. Strange. Bagnold continued. I see you've honored our agreement about public appearances. As promised, Strange replied smoothly. Harry needed his school supplies, after all. The young man with Bagnald was practically vibrating with curiosity. Minister, perhaps an introduction, of course, how rude of me. This is Percy Weasley, recently appointed junior assistant in my office. Weasley, meet Harry Potter and his guardian, Dr. Stephen Strange. Percy thrust out his hand enthusiastically. An honor, Mr. Potter. My younger brother Ron will be in your year at Hogwarts. And Dr. Strange, I've read the ministry reports about your unique magical tradition. Fascinating stuff. Strange raised an eyebrow. Ministry reports? Bagnald cleared her throat. Standard documentation for our records. Nothing invasive, I assure you. Of course. Strange replied, his tone suggesting he thought otherwise. After a few more minutes of carefully polite conversation, they extricated themselves from the official encounter and made their way back to the leaky cauldron, where Dumbledore opened another portal back to his office. Well, that was illuminating. Strange commented once they were safely back at Hogwarts. The Ministry is monitoring our arrangement more closely than they initially indicated. Millicent has always been thorough. Dumbledore replied mildly. And given Harry's importance to our world, hardly surprising. I'm standing right here. Harry reminded them, somewhat exasperated by being discussed as if absent. Both men had the grace to look apologetic. Forgive us, Harry, Dumbledore said. Old habits of speaking around young ears. But you're quite right, these matters concern you directly. He sat behind his desk, gesturing for them to take seats opposite. Now, we should discuss the practical arrangements for your attendance at Hogwarts while continuing your studies with Dr. Strange. The conversation that followed outlined a complex schedule. Harry would attend normal classes with his peers, but 3 evenings a week, he would use a special sealed chamber Dumbledore was preparing for mystic arts practice, where Strange would visit to continue his training. You will need to be careful, Harry, Dumbledore cautioned. While I have informed the faculty about your dual magical education, your fellow students may not understand. Particularly given the current climate in certain wizarding circles. What climate? Harry asked. Dumbledore and Strange exchanged glances. There are factions, Strange explained carefully, who believe that traditional wizarding practices should remain pure, untainted by outside influences. They won't like me very much, then, Harry concluded. Some may not, Dumbledore agreed. But others will be curious, intrigued. You will find your allies, Harry, just as you will identify those who resist change. Like Master Mordo, Harry murmured. Strange's expression tightened. Yes. Resistance comes from both sides. Which is why your position is both challenging and potentially transformative. The bridge between worlds, Dumbledore added, eyes twinkling. A convergence point for magical traditions that have remained separate for too long. Harry felt the weight of expectation settling on his shoulders, not just as the boy who lived, but as something new, a magical hybrid in a world of rigid traditions. The remainder of summer passed in final preparations. Harry packed and repacked his trunk, practiced basic wizarding spells with his new wand, which responded to him with significantly more power than the training wand had, and spent hours reviewing both his Hogwarts texts and the mystic arts manuscripts Strange had given him. Strange had crafted special focusing crystals that Harry could use at Hogwarts, similar to the pendant but designed for specific spells that might otherwise interact dangerously with the school's ancient protective magics. The key, Strange emphasized during their final training session before departure, is restraint. You have extraordinary potential in both magical systems, Harry, but Hogwarts isn't the place to experiment with their integration. Save that for our private sessions. Harry nodded, though inwardly he wondered how he was supposed to compartmentalize two magical approaches that had become increasingly intertwined in his practice. The night before September 1st, Harry sat on his bed at the Sanctum, surrounded by magical books and equipment. Tomorrow he would board the Hogwarts Express, begin the next chapter of his magical education. A soft knock at his door pulled him from his thoughts. Come in. Strange entered, holding a small wooden box. I have one final gift for you before tomorrow. Harry accepted the box curiously. Inside lay a small hand mirror with an ornate silver frame. A communication mirror, Strange explained. Its twin remains here at the Sanctum. Should you need to contact me between our scheduled sessions, simply speak my name to the mirror. Harry turned the mirror over in his hands, feeling the subtle magical resonance. Thank you. He hesitated, then continued. I'm nervous about tomorrow. Strange nodded. That's natural. You're entering a new environment, with expectations and challenges we cannot fully anticipate. What if I can't keep the magic separate? What if I mess up and do something? I don't know, impossible by wizarding standards? Then you'll handle it, Strange said simply. You've faced greater challenges than school politics, Harry. Trust your training, trust yourself. He paused. And remember, innovation often faces resistance before acceptance. Harry smiled weakly. So I just need to survive the resistance part. You won't be alone, Strange reminded him. Dumbledore understands what we're attempting. And you'll make friends. Miss Granger seemed quite interested in your unique perspective. And enemies, Harry added quietly. From both sides, probably. Possibly, Strange acknowledged. But adversity often clarifies purpose. They sat in companionable silence for a moment. I'll miss this place, Harry admitted. It's been more of a home than I ever had before. It will remain your home, Strange assured him. During holidays and summers. And after Hogwarts, should you wish to continue your mystic arts training. Of course I will, Harry said immediately. Strange smiled. We'll see what 7 years at a wizarding school does to your perspective. But the option will always be open to you. He rose to leave. Get some sleep, Harry. Tomorrow begins early. Good night, Dr. Strange. And thank you for everything. After Strange departed, Harry packed the mirror carefully in his trunk. Despite his nervousness, excitement bubbled through him. Tomorrow he would board a train to a castle full of magic, the same school his parents had attended. He would meet other young wizards and witches, learn spells and potions, and begin building a life that connected to his heritage. Yet he would carry with him the teachings of the mystic arts, knowledge that expanded and sometimes contradicted traditional wizarding magic. Harry touched the pendant beneath his pajamas, feeling its reassuring warmth. 2 worlds converging in one person. Whatever challenges that convergence might bring, Harry Potter was as prepared as he could be to face them. Platform 9 3/4 bustled with activity as Strange escorted Harry through the magical barrier. The Scarlet Hogwarts Express waited on the tracks, belching steam that swirled around the crowd of students and parents saying their goodbyes. Many heads turned as they passed. Harry in his school robes attracted attention. Strange in his distinctly non-wizarding attire drew outright stares. Blimey, that's Harry Potter! Who's that with him? I heard he's been raised by some foreign wizard. Harry kept his head high, focused on finding an empty compartment. Strange walked beside him, seemingly oblivious to the whispers, though Harry knew he missed nothing. Potter! Over here! They turned to see a large family of redheads waving from further down the platform. The youngest boy, about Harry's age, grinned awkwardly. The Weasleys, Strange murmured. Dumbledore mentioned them. Good people, by all accounts. They made their way over, and a plump, friendly-looking woman stepped forward. Harry dear, we're so pleased to meet you at last. I'm Molly Weasley. Arthur and I are friends of Albus's. She turned to Strange. And you must be Dr. Strange. Albus has told us so much about you. A pleasure, Mrs. Weasley. Strange replied with a polite nod. The red-haired boy stepped forward, ears reddening. I'm Ron. Ron Weasley. We're going to be in the same year. Nice to meet you, Harry said, genuinely pleased to make a connection before even boarding the train. 2 identical boys pushed forward. Fred and George Weasley at your service, they announced in unison. We've heard you've been learning some very interesting magic, Potter. Their mother swatted them away. Leave him be. He doesn't need you two pestering him already. As the Weasleys helped Harry load his trunk onto the train, he spotted Hermione Granger saying goodbye to her parents nearby. He waved, and she brightened, hurrying over. "Harry, I hoped I'd see you here. I've been reading about Hogwarts houses. Which one do you think you'll be in?" "I'm hoping for Gryffindor, it sounds by far the best." Ron rolled his eyes. "Mental, this one. Been chattering about houses since she found us asking about the platform." Hermione bristled. "Well, it's important. The house becomes like your family at Hogwarts." "They're both right," Harry said diplomatically. "It matters, but probably not as much as we think it does now." A whistle blew, signaling the train's imminent departure. Final goodbyes were exchanged as students hurried aboard. Strange drew Harry slightly aside for a private word. "Remember what we discussed. Caution with your abilities, focus on integration, and if anything unusual happens, contact you immediately." Harry finished. "I know, sir." Strange placed a hand on Harry's shoulder. "You're ready for this, Harry. Trust your instincts. Will you be there? At the sorting ceremony?" "Observing only," Strange confirmed. "Dumbledore has arranged it. I won't interfere, but I'll be present." Relief washed through Harry. Knowing Strange would be there, even just watching, made the whole thing less intimidating. With final goodbyes, Harry boarded the train, joining Ron and Hermione in a compartment. As the Hogwarts Express pulled away from the station, Harry leaned out the window, watching Strange's tall figure grow smaller until it disappeared from view. The journey passed pleasantly, if somewhat awkwardly at times. Ron and Hermione clearly had different personalities that occasionally clashed, but Harry found himself enjoying both their company. Ron's knowledge of wizarding culture complemented Hermione's academic approach, while Harry's unique perspective often bridged their different viewpoints. "So you really can do magic without a wand?" Ron asked at one point, eyes wide with disbelief. "Different kind of magic," Harry explained, though not entirely accurately. "It uses gestures to channel dimensional energy rather than a wand to focus internal magic." "Fascinating!" Hermione leaned forward eagerly. "Is it documented anywhere? I'd love to read about it." "Most books on it wouldn't be in the Hogwarts library," Harry said. "Dr. Strange might let me share some basic texts with you, though." Their conversation was interrupted when the compartment door slid open, revealing a pale boy with platinum blonde hair, flanked by two larger boys who resembled bodyguards. "They're saying Harry Potter is in this compartment," the boy announced without preamble. "Is it you?" "Yes," Harry replied cautiously. The boy studied him with calculating eyes. "I'm Malfoy. Draco Malfoy." He glanced dismissively at Ron and Hermione. "You'll soon find that some wizarding families are better than others, Potter. You don't want to go making friends with the wrong sort. I can help you there." He extended his hand. Harry didn't take it. "I think I can tell the wrong sort for myself, thanks," he said coolly. Malfoy's pale face flushed pink. "Be careful, Potter. I've heard about your unconventional upbringing. My father says it's an insult to proper wizarding tradition, letting an outsider raise the boy who lived." Harry felt his magic stir in response to his rising anger, the pendant beneath his robes warming slightly. He took a calming breath, just as Strange had taught him. "Your father is entitled to his opinion," he replied evenly. "As am I." Malfoy's eyes narrowed. "You'll learn soon enough that some magical approaches are superior to others. Hogwarts teaches proper wizardry, not whatever strange foreign magic you've been dabbling in." With that parting shot, he and his companions departed, leaving an uncomfortable silence in their wake. "What an absolutely horrible boy," Hermione said finally. "That's Malfoy for you," Ron muttered. "His whole family thinks they're wizarding royalty because they're pure blood." Harry sighed. "Dr. Strange warned me some people would react this way." "Well, they're wrong," Hermione declared firmly. "Learning different magical approaches sounds fascinating. I wish I'd had the opportunity." Her support warmed Harry, as did Ron's vehement agreement that Malfoy's a git who doesn't know what he's talking about. The remainder of the journey passed without further incident, though Harry noticed more students finding excuses to pass their compartment, clearly hoping to catch a glimpse of him. By the time they arrived at Hogsmeade Station, darkness had fallen. "For his years! For his years over here!" came Hagrid's booming voice as they disembarked. Following the giant across the lake in small boats, Harry got his first view of Hogwarts Castle. The magnificent structure rose against the night sky, windows glowing with warm light, towers and turrets reaching toward the stars. But what most impressed Harry was the castle's magical signature: layers upon layers of ancient spells, protective enchantments, and power accumulated over centuries. To his mystic arts-trained senses, Hogwarts wasn't just a building, it was a living, breathing magical entity. As they approached the castle doors, Harry sensed another presence, familiar and reassuring. Strange was nearby, observing as promised, though invisible to ordinary sight. Professor McGonagall met them in the entrance hall, explaining the sorting ceremony before leading them into the Great Hall. Harry walked between Ron and Hermione, trying to ignore the hundreds of eyes fixed on him. At the staff table, Dumbledore caught his eye and gave an encouraging nod. The Sorting Hat's song surprised and delighted Harry. When it came his turn to try on the ancient hat, whispers erupted throughout the hall. "Potter, Harry!" As Harry stepped forward, he felt the pendant against his chest grow warm, strange silent support. The hat dropped over his eyes, and a small voice spoke in his ear. "Difficult, very difficult. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind either. There's talent, oh yes, and a thirst to prove yourself. But what's this? How interesting, a convergence of magical traditions. I've never seen such a thing in all my centuries. Where to put you?" Harry gripped the edges of the stool, thinking, not Slytherin. Not Slytherin. Not Slytherin, eh? The small voice replied. "Are you sure? You could be great, you know. It's all here in your head, and Slytherin would help you on the way to greatness, no doubt about that." "I want to build bridges, not divisions," Harry thought firmly. "Bridges, eh? Well, in that case, better be Gryffindor." The last word was shouted to the entire hall. Harry removed the hat to thunderous applause from the Gryffindor table. As he made his way to join them, he caught a flicker of movement near the entrance hall, Strange, dropping his invisibility spell for just a moment to give Harry an approving nod before vanishing again. Ron and Hermione were both sorted into Gryffindor as well, much to Harry's relief. As they settled in for the welcoming feast, Harry felt a curious mixture of excitement and trepidation. He belonged here, among these young wizards and witches, learning the magic of his parents. Yet he also belonged to the mystical tradition Strange had taught him, a tradition most of his new peers didn't even know existed. The convergence of those worlds, within himself and potentially within the broader magical community, was just beginning. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Harry Potter was ready to face them, not just as the boy who lived, but as the first true bridge between ancient magical traditions. As Dumbledore rose to give his welcoming speech, Harry caught the headmaster looking at him with that characteristic twinkle in his blue eyes. The old wizard raised his goblet in a subtle toast that few would notice. To new beginnings. To magical convergence. To bridges yet unbuilt. Harry smiled and raised his own goblet in response. Let the adventure begin. Chapter 3. The Reckoning. Harry's first few months at Hogwarts passed in a whirlwind of classes, homework, and careful navigation of his unique position. By December, he'd settled into a rhythm, wizarding studies by day, mystic arts practice 3 evenings a week in the special chamber Dumbledore had prepared in the castle's east wing. The chamber itself was a marvel of magical engineering, a perfect fusion of Hogwarts' ancient protective enchantments and strange dimensional safeguards. From the outside, it appeared to be nothing more than an unused classroom door. Inside, however, the space expanded into a replica of the Sanctum's training room, complete with mystic artifacts and focusing tools. It was here that Harry now sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed in meditation as Dr. Strange observed from nearby. "Your aura is unsettled," Strange noted. "Something's troubling you." Harry opened his eyes with a sigh. "It's getting harder to keep the magic separate." "Explain." In charms yesterday, Professor Flitwick had us practicing the levitation charm. I did it perfectly, but. Harry hesitated. I wasn't just using my wand. I was unconsciously drawing on dimensional energy too. The feather didn't just float, it glowed with mystic light. Everyone saw it. Strange frowned. What was the reaction? Mixed. Flitwick was fascinated, asked a dozen questions I couldn't really answer. Some students thought it was brilliant. Others. Harry's expression darkened. Malfoy called it polluted magic. Said I was corrupting proper wizarding techniques. I see. Strange paced thoughtfully. The integration of your magical systems is progressing faster than anticipated. It was inevitable, but I had hoped for more time before it became obvious to others. Harry twisted his wand between his fingers, a nervous habit he'd developed. Am I doing something wrong? No, Strange said firmly. You're doing something unprecedented. The difficulty isn't your magical development, it's managing the social and political implications. Harry nodded glumly. Professor McGonagall pulled me aside after Transfiguration last week. Said I needed to adhere to standard methodology during class demonstrations. Minerva is understandably protective of wizarding traditions. Strange replied diplomatically. She sees value in mastering the foundations before experimenting with variations. But that's just it, Harry said, frustration evident. I'm not experimenting. My magic is just happening this way now. The two systems are merging, and I can't always separate them anymore. Strange regarded him thoughtfully. Then perhaps it's time we stop trying to separate them. Harry looked up, surprised. But you said, I said caution was necessary while you learned the basics of both traditions. You've now had sufficient grounding in each. Strange seated himself across from Harry. The next phase may be acceptance and intentional integration, rather than continued compartmentalization. Hope flickered across Harry's face. You mean actually try to combine them? Under supervision, Strange cautioned. But yes. If your magic naturally seeks convergence, fighting against it creates tension that could lead to instability. How do we start? Strange smiled slightly. We already have. Your instinctive combination of wand work and dimensional drawing in Flitwick's class was a beginning. Now we need to understand the principles behind successful integration. For the next hour, they explored the theoretical foundations of magical convergence. Harry described various instances where his two magical systems had intersected, and together they mapped patterns and principles that seemed to govern these interactions. The key appears to be intentionality, Strange concluded. When you consciously direct both systems toward a unified purpose, the result is harmonious amplification. When one system activates unconsciously while you're focused on the other, unpredictability results. Harry nodded eagerly. That makes sense. Like in potions last week, I was so focused on brewing correctly that I didn't notice I was drawing ambient dimensional energy into the cauldron until the potion turned silver instead of blue. Exactly. Snape was undoubtedly thrilled, Strange remarked dryly. Harry grimaced. He vanished the entire potion and gave me detention. Said I was showing off and deliberately contaminating the brewing process. Professor Snape has his own reasons for resistance, Strange said carefully. His history with your father complicates his perspective on your magical experimentation. You mean he hated my dad so he hates me too? Harry translated bluntly. Strange didn't contradict him. Emotional context often influences magical theory preferences. It's not rational, but it's human. Their session concluded with a new exercise, a deliberate attempt to channel both magical systems simultaneously toward a single spell. Harry held his wand in the traditional position while simultaneously forming mystic arts gestures with his free hand. Lumos, he whispered, focusing his intention on creating light through both magical channels. The result was spectacular, a perfect sphere of radiance that illuminated the chamber in pulsing waves of golden light. Unlike his accidental combination in Flitwick's class, this manifestation was stable, controlled, and far more powerful than either magical approach could have produced alone. Magnificent, Strange murmured, studying the light construct. Perfect harmony between internal core magic and external dimensional energy. Harry's face shone with more than just reflected light. For the first time, he'd intentionally united the two magical traditions he'd been straddling, not as separate skills but as complementary aspects of a single, integrated magical approach. "This is what it's supposed to feel like," he said wonderingly. "Balanced. Complete." Strange nodded, genuine pride in his expression. "You're pioneering an entirely new magical paradigm, Harry. One that honors both traditions while transcending their limitations. Why hasn't anyone done this before?" Harry asked, allowing the light to fade. "Few have had the opportunity to study both systems from childhood," Strange replied. "And magical communities are notoriously insular. The wand wielders have their traditions, the mystic arts practitioners have ours, and rarely do the twain meet. Until now," Harry said softly. "Until you," Strange corrected. "Which is why certain parties on both sides find your development concerning." Harry's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Strange hesitated, then seemed to reach a decision. "I've been meaning to discuss this with you. There have been communications between certain factions in the wizarding world and certain elements within the mystic orders. Specifically, traditionalists who view magical convergence as threatening to established power structures. Like Malfoy's father? And Master Mordo? Among others. Strange confirmed. Lucius Malfoy has been corresponding with Mordo and several other masters who share his conservative views on magical purity. Harry absorbed this with growing concern. They're working together? Against what I'm doing. Against what you represent. Strange corrected. A challenge to the artificial boundaries they've built their influence upon. Before Harry could respond, a familiar silver instrument on Strange's belt began to pulse with magical energy. "Wong," Strange explained, his expression shifting to one of alert focus. "Something's happening at the Sanctum." He stood quickly. "We'll continue this discussion next session. For now, focus on intentional integration in your practice, but with restraint in public settings." With a circular gesture, Strange opened a portal back to the Sanctum, the New York skyline visible through the dimensional doorway. "Be vigilant, Harry," he added before stepping through. "And remember, your unique magic isn't a flaw to be hidden, but it is a power that others may fear. Caution and compassion must balance innovation." The portal closed behind him, leaving Harry alone with troubling thoughts about forces aligning against his magical development, and what that might mean for his future. The Great Hall buzzed with pre-holiday excitement during breakfast the next morning. Christmas decorations adorned the enchanted ceiling, and students chattered about plans for the upcoming break. Harry sat between Ron and Hermione, pushing eggs around his plate distractedly. "You look terrible," Ron observed through a mouthful of toast. "Rough session with Dr. Strange?" Harry had told his friends about the integration discussion, though not Strange's warnings about political opposition. "Just thinking about magical theory," Harry replied vaguely. Hermione's eyes brightened with academic interest. "The convergence principle you mentioned? I've been researching historical precedents in the library, but there's remarkably little documentation on cross-traditional magical approaches." "That's because there aren't any," came a sneering voice from behind them. Draco Malfoy stood there, flanked as always by Crabbe and Goyle. His pale, pointed face wore an expression of smug superiority. "Proper wizards use wands, Potter. All this hand-waving nonsense you've been mixing in is just showing off." Harry tensed but kept his voice level. "Different magical traditions have existed for centuries, Malfoy. Just because your family only recognizes one approach doesn't mean others aren't valid." Malfoy's eyes narrowed. "My father says it's more than different. It's dangerous. Magic that doesn't come from a wizard's core is unstable and unpredictable. That's why the Ministry has always regulated it." "Your father doesn't know everything," Hermione interjected. "Historical records show numerous magical traditions predating modern wizardry. The ancient Egyptians, for instance." "Nobody asked you, Granger," Malfoy snapped. Muggle-borns barely understand proper magic, let alone complex magical theory. Ron half rose from his seat, but Harry placed a restraining hand on his arm. Is there something specific you wanted, Malfoy? Or did you just come over to demonstrate your ignorance about magical diversity? A flush spread across Malfoy's pale cheeks. Watch yourself, Potter. My father says things are changing. The Ministry is reviewing all non-standard magical practices, especially those practiced by underage wizards. Your special arrangement might not last much longer. With that parting shot, he stalked away, leaving an uncomfortable silence in his wake. Git, Ron muttered. Is that true? Hermione asked worriedly. About the Ministry reviewing magical practices? Harry frowned. I don't know. Dr. Strange mentioned something about political opposition, but not specific Ministry action. Malfoy's probably making it up, Ron said confidently. His father's always boasting about his Ministry influence, but half of it's rubbish. Harry nodded, though doubt lingered. The timing of Malfoy's taunt, coming right after Strange's warning about collaborating traditionalists, seemed too coincidental. His concerns deepened later that day when Professor McGonagall summoned him to her office after Transfiguration class. Potter, she began once they were seated. I've received a communication from the Department of Magical Education regarding your dual magical training. Harry's stomach tightened. What about it, Professor? McGonagall's expression was unreadable. They're requesting detailed documentation of all non-wizarding magical techniques you've been taught, with particular emphasis on any that you've incorporated into standard wizarding spellwork. Why? Ostensibly for research purposes, McGonagall replied, a hint of skepticism in her tone. Though I suspect there are other motivations at play. Malfoy mentioned something about the Ministry reviewing non-standard magical practices, Harry said carefully. McGonagall's lips thinned. Mr. Malfoy would do well to be more discreet about his father's political machinations. She adjusted her spectacles. The headmaster is handling the Ministry's request, Potter. You needn't concern yourself with it directly. But it does concern me, Harry insisted. If they're questioning my magical education, what they're questioning, McGonagall interrupted, is whether Albus Dumbledore and Dr. Strange have the authority to authorize experimental magical integration outside Ministry oversight. Her expression softened slightly. Politics, Potter? Nothing more. Harry wasn't convinced. Professor, what's your opinion? About combining magical traditions? McGonagall studied him for a long moment. My opinion, Potter, is that magical knowledge should never be suppressed out of fear or prejudice. That said, she continued briskly, foundations must be mastered before innovations can be properly understood. Your tendency to blend dimensional gestures into standard wand work often masks whether you've truly grasped the wizarding principle being taught. I understand both principles, Harry assured her. I just find they work better together sometimes. Indeed. McGonagall's expression was thoughtful. Your performance in class has been illuminating, if occasionally concerning. Professor Flitwick, in particular, has expressed fascination with your combined approach to charms. And Professor Snape? A glimmer of amusement crossed McGonagall's features. Professor Snape has expressed his opinions quite colorfully in the staff room. Suffice it to say he prefers traditional methodology. Harry nodded, unsurprised. For now, McGonagall concluded, continue your studies as directed by your teachers, both at Hogwarts and from Dr. Strange. The headmaster will address any political concerns that arise. As Harry left her office, he couldn't shake the feeling that forces were aligning against him in ways he didn't fully understand. Malfoy's taunts, the Ministry's sudden interest in documentation, Strange's warnings about collaborating traditionalists, all pointed to growing opposition to his unique magical development. He needed more information, and he knew just where to start looking. That evening, after dinner, he found Hermione in their usual corner of the Gryffindor common room, surrounded by stacks of books. Research help? He asked, dropping into the chair beside her. She looked up, brown eyes alight with scholarly enthusiasm. I've been investigating magical tradition intersection points. Did you know that certain African wizarding communities have been using wandless gesture systems alongside traditional focus objects for centuries? It's not precisely the same as what you're doing with dimensional energy, but the principle of dual system magic has precedent. Harry grinned despite his concerns. Hermione's passion for knowledge was a constant he'd come to rely on. Brilliant, he said. But I was hoping for help with something more current. What can you find about ministry regulations on non-standard magic? Specifically, recent policy changes or proposed reviews. Hermione's expression turned thoughtful. That would be in current ministry bulletins. Percy Weasley subscribes to them, always going on about staying informed on policy developments. We could ask Ron if he'd write to Percy. Perfect. Harry agreed. And maybe something about historical conflicts between different magical traditions? If there's precedent for what's happening now. I'll check the restricted section, Hermione said decisively. Professor Binns gave me a permission slip for my essay on international magical cooperation through the ages. Ron joined them shortly after, agreeing to write to Percy immediately. He'll be chuffed to be asked about ministry business, Ron predicted as he penned the letter. Loved showing off his insider knowledge, that one. As his friends mobilized to gather information, Harry felt a surge of gratitude. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he wouldn't face them alone. Later that night, once his dorm mates were asleep, Harry retrieved the communication mirror Strange had given him. Dr. Strange, he whispered to the reflective surface. After a moment, the mirror rippled and Strange's face appeared. Harry, is everything all right? Quickly, Harry recounted the day's developments, Malfoy's taunt, McGonagall's summons, and his suspicions about coordinated opposition. Strange listened gravely. Your instincts are sound. There have been developments here as well. What happened with Wong earlier? Is everything okay at the Sanctum? A minor incursion, Strange replied, though his expression suggested it had been anything but minor. More concerning is what followed. Master Mordo visited, accompanied by a wizard calling himself a representative of the Department of Magical Cooperation, Special Division. A ministry official? At the Sanctum? Indeed. They presented formal documentation requesting a complete accounting of all magical techniques taught to the minor wizard Harry James Potter and an immediate cessation of any practices that contradict established wizarding protocols. Harry's stomach dropped. They're trying to stop my training. They're attempting to assert control over an unprecedented magical development. Strange corrected. One with implications for power structures in both our communities. What did you tell them? A hint of grim satisfaction crossed Strange's features. I informed them that the Sanctum Sanctorum falls outside ministry jurisdiction, as does the magical education of my ward and mystic arts traditions. How did they take that? About as well as you'd expect, Strange replied dryly. The ministry representative threatened international magical sanctions. Mordo spoke of appealing to the other masters for a ruling on proper boundaries. Harry ran a hand through his already messy hair. This is getting serious. It was always serious, Harry. The convergence of magical traditions represents a fundamental shift in how magic is understood and practiced. Strange's expression grew more intent. Which is why your development must continue, despite opposition. You represent something vital, a bridge between artificial divisions in magical knowledge. But if the Ministry and the Masters both object, not all do. Strange interrupted. Dumbledore supports our approach, as do several progressive elements within the Ministry. Among the Masters, opinions are divided. Change always faces resistance before acceptance. Harry nodded, though anxiety still churned within him. What should I do? Continue your training? Document your results carefully, both successes and failures. Evidence of stable, controlled magical integration will be our strongest argument. Strange paused. And be prepared for more direct challenges. Those who fear change rarely limit themselves to political maneuvers for long. After ending the communication, Harry lay awake for hours, contemplating the growing forces aligned against his magical development. What had begun as an unusual educational arrangement now seemed to be evolving into something more consequential, a challenge to fundamental assumptions about how magic should be practiced and who should control its expression. The weight of that realization was both sobering and oddly empowering. If his unique magical approach represented something important enough to frighten established powers in both worlds, perhaps it was even more significant than he'd realized. The Christmas holiday arrived, bringing a welcome respite from classes but not from the swirling politics surrounding Harry's magical education. He had originally planned to stay at Hogwarts, but growing concerns about ministry interference prompted a change of plans. 2 days before Christmas, Strange arrived to escort him back to the Sanctum for the break. A strategic withdrawal, Strange explained as they prepared to depart. Hogwarts has become a focal point for too much unwanted attention. Dumbledore, who had come to see them off, nodded gravely. Indeed. The castle has received no fewer than 17 official ministry inquiries regarding Harry's training in the past week alone. A brief absence will give us time to address these matters without disruption to Harry's studies. Harry's friends had already left for their own family holidays, Ron to the Burrow and Hermione to ski with her parents. He'd promised to stay in touch and return for the start of term in January, though privately he wondered if circumstances might prevent that. The Sanctum welcomed Harry like an old friend, its familiar magical energies wrapping around him the moment he stepped through Strange's portal. Wong was waiting in the foyer, his usually stoic expression giving way to a small smile. "Welcome home, young Potter." Home. Despite everything, the word resonated with truth. This place, with its impossible architecture and ancient artifacts, had been his first true home. Hogwarts was magnificent, but the Sanctum had saved him, had shown him who he could become. Strange wasted no time resuming Harry's integrated magical training. With the constraints of Hogwarts removed, they could explore the convergence of traditions more freely. Each morning began with physical training and meditation, followed by advanced spell work that deliberately combined wand work with mystic arts gestures. The results were extraordinary. Spells that traditionally required complex wand movements could be streamlined and amplified with dimensional energy manipulation. Mystic arts techniques that normally demanded extensive preparation could be catalyzed and focused through Harry's wand. "You're creating an entirely new magical system," Wong observed after witnessing Harry combine a shield charm with a multidimensional barrier spell. "Neither purely wizarding nor purely mystic arts, but something greater than the sum of its parts. The question," Strange added, "is whether we can document it thoroughly enough to demonstrate its stability and value to skeptics in both communities." To that end, they began compiling a comprehensive record of Harry's magical development, principles governing successful integration, case studies of specific spell combinations, theoretical frameworks explaining the underlying harmony between seemingly disparate traditions. Christmas Day brought a brief respite from these intensive efforts. Strange had never been one for elaborate celebrations, but this year the Sanctum was decked with subtle magical decorations, enchanted snow that fell from the ceiling but vanished before touching the ground, candles that burned with colors corresponding to the viewer's mood, and a modest tree adorned with ornaments from various dimensions. Gifts were exchanged over a breakfast feast prepared by Wong, whose culinary talents rivaled his magical ones. Harry received books on advanced magical theory from both traditions, enchanted training tools, and a magnificent cloak from Dumbledore, his father's invisibility cloak, apparently a family heirloom of unusual power. Strange studied the cloak with professional interest. Extraordinary craftsmanship. The enchantment has barely faded despite what must be centuries of use. Dumbledore's note said it was my dad's, Harry explained, running the fluid, silvery fabric between his fingers. The spell construction suggests far older origins, Strange mused. This may be an artifact of significant magical importance, not merely a well-crafted invisibility cloak. Before they could discuss it further, a familiar silver instrument on Strange's belt began to pulse urgently, the same one that had activated during their training session at Hogwarts. Strange's expression darkened. "Wong, secure the Sanctum. All defensive protocols." "What's happening?" Harry asked, alarmed by the sudden tension. Multiple breach attempts at our outer wards, Strange replied, moving swiftly toward the foyer. Someone is testing our defenses. Harry followed, wand at the ready. Who would attack the Sanctum? Someone who considers its current activities threatening, Strange said grimly. They reached the main entrance hall just as Wong completed a series of complex gestures that strengthened the Sanctum's protective enchantments. The very air seemed to thicken with magical energy. 7 distinct magical signatures, Wong reported. 4 using wizarding approach, 3 using mystic arts. A coordinated assault, Strange murmured. As I feared. Harry's heart raced. Mordo? Almost certainly. Strange turned to him, expression serious. Harry, I want you to go to the mirror dimension chamber and stay there until one of us comes for you. But I can help, Harry protested. My magic is precisely what they're after, Strange interrupted. Your safety is paramount. Before Harry could argue further, the Sanctum shuddered as a powerful spell impacted the outer wards. Strange and Wong exchanged grim looks. Go, Harry! Now. Reluctantly, Harry turned toward the staircase leading to the mirror dimension access point, a specially prepared room where reality could be manipulated without affecting the physical world. He'd taken only 3 steps when a blinding flash of light filled the foyer. When his vision cleared, Harry found himself facing a sight he never expected. Carl Mordo standing side by side with Lucius Malfoy in the Sanctum's entrance hall, surrounded by several hooded figures from both magical traditions. Strange. Mordo's deep voice resonated through the hall. This conflict need not continue. Surrender the boy and the documentation of his training, and we will depart peacefully. Breaking through my ward suggests peaceful intentions aren't your priority. Strange replied coolly, the cloak of levitation settling around his shoulders as he stepped forward. Lucius Malfoy's aristocratic features twisted in a cold smile. The Ministry of Magic has authorized this intervention under the International Statute for the Protection of Magical Practice. The boy's experimental magical education has been deemed a potential threat to the stability of established magical systems. By whom? Strange demanded. A committee of traditionalists with no understanding of the principles involved? By experts concerned with maintaining the natural order, Mordo countered. You of all people should understand the dangers of bending fundamental magical laws, Strange. Harry moved to Strange's side, ignoring the sorcerer's warning glance. There's nothing unnatural about combining magical traditions. They come from the same source, they're just different approaches to the same energy. Such certainty from one so young, Malfoy said dismissively. This is precisely why children should not experiment with forces beyond their understanding. Understanding is exactly what we've been developing, Harry retorted. We've documented every aspect of magical convergence, the principles, the techniques, the safeguards. Documentation that we've come to collect, one of the hooded wizards interjected, stepping forward. Along with the boy himself, for proper evaluation by ministry experts. Wong moved subtly, positioning himself to defend the library where their research was stored. Strange remained focused on Mordo, clearly considering him the primary threat. Harry is under my protection, Strange stated, his voice leaving no room for negotiation. As is the knowledge we've developed together. If you wish to discuss theoretical concerns about magical integration, we welcome scholarly dialogue. This show of force, however, will be met in kind. Mordo shook his head. Always so stubborn, Strange. The boy represents a dangerous convergence that neither the Masters nor the Ministry can allow to continue unchecked. His magic is becoming something neither side fully understands, an unknown variable in delicate magical balances maintained for centuries. You mean an unknown variable in power structures maintained for centuries? Harry said suddenly, insight dawning. This isn't about magical stability at all. It's about control. Lucius Malfoy's eyes narrowed. Impertinent, just like his father. But accurate, Strange said. Convergence threatens established hierarchies in both our communities. A practitioner proficient in both systems would be subject to neither's exclusive authority. Enough philosophy, snapped one of the hooded mystic practitioners. "We have our orders." Before anyone could respond, the intruder unleashed a spell unlike anything Harry had seen, a hybridized attack combining the precision of wizarding magic with the dimensional manipulation of the mystic arts. Strange barely managed to deflect it with a hasty shield, the impact sending vibrations through the Sanctum's floor. "They've been studying our work," Strange realized aloud. "Using our own research against us. Ironic, isn't it?" Mordo said as the other attackers spread out, forming a loose circle around them. "The very convergence you've championed, weaponized to end your experiment." Chaos erupted as both sides launched into battle. Wong created multilayered shields around the library while engaging two mystic practitioners. Strange confronted Mordo directly, their spells colliding in spectacular displays of magical prowess. The wizards focused their attention on Harry, clearly intent on capturing rather than harming him. Harry ducked behind a pillar as spell fire erupted around him. His heart pounded, but his mind remained clear, focused on the principles of integrated magic he'd been studying so intensively. These attackers might have learned rudimentary combinations from stolen research, but they lacked the fundamental understanding, the harmony of systems that had become second nature to him. Taking a deep breath, Harry emerged from cover, wand in one hand while the other formed precise mystic arts gestures. The pendant Strange had given him on his 10th birthday grew warm against his chest, channeling and stabilizing the dual magical flow. "Protego Dimensio!" he called out, combining the standard shield charm with dimensional manipulation. The result was extraordinary, a shield that existed partially in this dimension and partially in others, rendering it impervious to attacks from either magical system. Spells from the wizard splashed harmlessly against it, while mystic energy constructs simply passed through its interdimensional structure without affecting Harry. Strange, momentarily distracted from his duel with Mordo, shot Harry an approving glance. "Well done!" Encouraged, Harry pressed his advantage. Moving with the martial arts precision Strange had drilled into him, he advanced across the foyer, shield maintained with his left hand while his wand traced complex patterns with his right. "Petrificus Totalis," he incanted, but instead of directing the spell at a single target, he channeled it through a dimensional gateway he simultaneously created, multiplying and redirecting the spell to strike three wizards at once from unexpected angles. The hooded figures dropped, magically paralyzed. Lucius Malfoy's face contorted with fury. "Impossible!" "Not impossible," Harry countered. "Just previously unexplored. The limitations weren't in the magic, they were in the arbitrary boundaries between traditions." The remaining attackers intensified their efforts. Wong had successfully neutralized one of the mystic practitioners but was now struggling against the second. Strange and Mordo remained locked in stalemate, their magical mastery so evenly matched that neither could gain advantage. Harry realized that conventional tactics wouldn't resolve this confrontation quickly enough. If reinforcements arrived, from either the Ministry or Conservative Masters, they could find themselves overwhelmed. A risky idea formed in his mind. Something he and Strange had theorized but never attempted, a full convergence spell that would temporarily merge all participants into a shared magical consciousness, allowing direct understanding of each other's perspectives and intentions. The spell was dangerous, potentially exposing everyone's memories and magical knowledge without filters, but it might be the only way to break through the ideological barriers driving this conflict. "Dr. Strange!" Harry called out. "The Convergence revelation!" Strange's eyes widened momentarily before understanding dawned. With a subtle nod, he began shifting his battle with Mordo, maneuvering them both toward the center of the foyer where Harry stood. Wong, catching on to the plan, did the same with his opponent. "Now, Harry!" Strange shouted as the combatants aligned in a rough circle. Harry planted his feet firmly, raised his wand overhead, while his free hand formed the sign of the Vishanti. Drawing on every lesson, every principle of integrated magic he mastered, he channeled both his innate wizarding core and external dimensional energy into a single, unified spell. "Revelatio Convergentia!" he cried, the words themselves a fusion of Latin wizarding incantation and mystical invocation. Golden light exploded from Harry's wand and hand simultaneously, forming a dome that expanded outward to encompass everyone in the foyer. As it touched each person, their physical forms remained solid but their magical auras became visible, intertwining with streams of shared consciousness. Harry felt the others' minds connecting with his, Mordo's rigid adherence to magical tradition born from witnessing catastrophic spell failures, Malfoy's fear disguised as superiority, his genuine belief that magical mixing would lead to instability threatening his family, the confusion and conflicted loyalty of the other attackers who had been told they were preventing magical disaster. More importantly, they could feel Harry's experience, the natural harmony he'd discovered between seemingly disparate magical approaches, the stable principles governing successful integration, the expanded possibilities that threatened no one but offered benefits to all. Strange's consciousness served as an anchor, his years of mystical study providing context and framework for the shared revelation. Wong's encyclopedic knowledge filled in historical gaps, showing previous instances where magical traditions had beneficially cross-pollinated. For 30 seconds that felt like hours, they existed in perfect magical understanding, disagreement without misunderstanding, fear recognized but countered with evidence, dogma confronted with direct magical experience that couldn't be dismissed as theoretical. When the golden light finally faded, no one moved immediately. The magical connection had broken, but its impact lingered in stunned expressions and shaken certainties. Mordo was the first to speak. "This was not what we were told." His voice held confusion rather than conviction now. "No," Lucius Malfoy agreed, looking shaken. "The boy's magic is not unstable. It's—" He seemed to struggle finding words that contradicted his previous beliefs. "It's coherent. Structured. Revolutionary," finished one of the previously hooded mystic practitioners, who had removed his covering to reveal the face of an elderly Asian man Harry recognized as Master Chen from Convergence. "And far more advanced than our intelligence suggested." Strange lowered his hands, though he remained alert. Revolution need not mean destruction. Magical knowledge has always evolved, sometimes gradually, sometimes in leaps. "What you just experienced," Harry added, surprised at the steadiness in his voice, "wasn't just a spell. It was the truth of magical convergence. The arbitrary boundaries between our traditions have limited what's possible, made us fear what we don't understand about each other's approaches." He turned to Lucius Malfoy. "You saw it yourself. Combining magical systems doesn't weaken or corrupt either tradition, it creates something new that honors and expands both." Malfoy's aristocratic composure was returning, though uncertainty remained in his eyes. "What I saw was unexpected. It requires further study before conclusions can be drawn." "Study, not suppression," Strange said firmly. "That's all we've advocated from the beginning." Mordo stepped forward, his expression troubled but no longer hostile. "The elders of Convergence must be consulted. This development," he glanced at Harry with newfound respect, "is beyond what any of us anticipated. As must the Wiesengemat," Malfoy added. "The implications for magical education alone are significant." Harry could sense the shift in the room, from confrontation to wary consideration. The Convergence revelation spell had accomplished what months of documentation and argument could not, providing direct magical experience that bypassed entrenched positions. "We would welcome scholarly delegation from both communities," Strange offered. "Supervised observation of Harry's training, review of our documentation, open dialogue about implications and safeguards. Under neutral auspices," Wong added practically. "Neither exclusively ministry nor master's authority." Negotiations continued for hours, moving from the battle-scarred foyer to the Sanctum's formal meeting room. By evening, a tentative agreement had been reached. A joint oversight committee with representatives from both magical traditions would be formed to monitor and study Harry's continuing education, with Dumbledore serving as mediator between factions. As the last of the visitors departed, not as conquerors but as chastened collaborators, Harry finally allowed himself to relax. The immediate crisis had passed, though he harbored no illusions that all opposition had been eliminated. Entrenched power rarely yielded to new ideas without prolonged resistance. That was quite a risk you took, Strange said once they were alone, his tone a mixture of pride and concern. The Convergence revelation was theoretical for a reason. Forcing magical understanding between unwilling minds could have had catastrophic consequences. Harry nodded soberly. I know. But they weren't going to stop, and their misunderstanding was too fundamental for normal argument to overcome. Strange studied him thoughtfully. Your instincts were correct, as was your execution. Few adult practitioners could have maintained control of such a complex spell. I had help, Harry said, touching the pendant beneath his shirt. And proper training. A rare smile crossed Strange's face. Indeed you did. Though I suspect your natural affinity for magical integration would have emerged regardless. Some talents transcend teaching. Wong joined them, carrying a tray with steaming cups of tea. The Sanctum's defenses have been restored. Though I suggest reviewing the ward structure, their initial breach was concerning. Agreed, Strange said. Though I suspect we won't face a similar coordinated assault again. Today's revelation has changed the nature of the conflict. From opposition to cautious observation, Wong noted. For now, Harry added realistically. Until the next challenge. Strange nodded. Change is never a straight path, Harry. What you're pioneering, this convergence of traditions, represents a fundamental shift in magical understanding. There will be setbacks, resistance, even renewed opposition as implications become clearer. But also allies. Wong reminded them. Dumbledore. The progressive elements within both communities. Those who witnessed today's revelation firsthand. Harry sipped his tea thoughtfully. So what happens now? Do I return to Hogwarts? Yes, Strange confirmed. But with altered arrangements. The Joint Oversight Committee will require regular demonstrations of your progress, documentation of your techniques. Your training schedule will include official observers from both traditions. More scrutiny, Harry said with a grimace. More legitimacy. Strange countered. Your work transitions from forbidden experiment to recognized research. An important distinction. Harry considered this. And longer term? After Hogwarts? Strange exchanged glances with Wong before responding. That will depend on many factors, not least your own choices. You could become a bridge between magical communities, perhaps establish a new educational approach that draws from multiple traditions. Or focus on specific applications of convergent magic in healing, protection, dimensional stability. Or Quidditch, Harry added with a small grin, lightening the moment. Strange's eyes crinkled with amusement. Indeed. Though I suspect your talents might eventually demand more consequential application. That night, as Harry prepared for bed in his old room at the Sanctum, he reflected on the day's events. The attack had been frightening but had ultimately advanced their cause more effectively than months of careful documentation. Sometimes direct experience accomplished what theory and argument could not. More importantly, he'd proven, to himself as much as to others, that his unique magical approach represented not a dangerous anomaly but a viable evolution. The convergence of traditions wasn't a corruption to be feared but an expansion to be explored. As he drifted toward sleep, Harry thought about his parents, his wizard father and muggle-born witch mother, who had crossed their own boundaries to create something new. Perhaps his bridging of magical traditions was another form of the same fundamental truth, that divisions were often artificial, and the most powerful magic came from integration rather than separation. In his dreams, golden light connected disparate points into a unified whole, and the future shimmered with possibilities yet to be discovered. The remainder of the school year unfolded with unexpected smoothness, given the dramatic confrontation at the Sanctum. Harry returned to Hogwarts after the holiday break to find significant changes in his training arrangements. The chamber Dumbledore had prepared for mystic arts practice was expanded and formally designated as the Convergent Magic Research Facility, a grand name for what was essentially still a modified classroom, but one that now accommodated regular visits from ministry officials and masters of Camartage who came to observe Harry's training. Strange continued his thrice-weekly visits, though these sessions now included detailed documentation and occasional demonstrations for the Joint Oversight Committee. To Harry's surprise, several of his professors began attending as well, Flitwick with undisguised enthusiasm, McGonagall with cautious interest, even Snape with reluctant professional curiosity. "The stabilization principle is fascinating," Flitwick squeaked after witnessing Harry combine a hovering charm with dimensional anchoring. "It eliminates the gradual decay in levitation duration that affects standard charm application. The energy expenditure appears more efficient as well," noted Master Chin, who had become a regular observer following the Sanctum confrontation. "Less magical drainage for sustained effects." Even Lucius Malfoy made occasional appearances, his initial hostility tempered into wary analytical interest. His son, however, maintained a public stance of disdain, though Harry occasionally caught Draco watching his demonstrations with poorly concealed fascination. Ron found the whole situation hilarious. "Imagine Malfoy's dad being forced to admit you're not destroying magic as they know it," he chortled during breakfast one morning. "Must be eating him up inside." Hermione, predictably, was more interested in the academic implications. "They're talking about publishing a preliminary paper on magical convergence theory in Theoretical Magical Quarterly," she informed Harry excitedly. "Professor Vector says it could revolutionize arithmetic calculations." Harry took the attention in stride, focusing on his studies in both magical traditions and continuing to refine his integrated approach. The pendant Strange had given him 2 years earlier became a subject of particular interest to the observers. Its ability to stabilize the confluence of magical systems represented a breakthrough in magical artifact design. As spring blossomed across the Hogwarts grounds, Harry's unique position within the school evolved from controversial anomaly to reluctantly acknowledged innovation. His classmates, initially wary of his foreign magic, gradually became accustomed to seeing the occasional dimensional energy flare during practical lessons. "Can you teach me that finger-twirly thing you did in Charms?" Seamus Finnegan asked one evening in the common room. "The one that made your incendio turn blue?" "It's not just a finger-twirly thing," Harry explained with a smile. "It's a mystic arts form that redirects dimensional energy into the spell matrix. Without understanding the principles behind it, it could be dangerous." "So teach us the principles too," Dean Thomas suggested, several other Gryffindors nodding in agreement. Harry glanced at Hermione, who had been helping him organize his notes on magical convergence. She gave an encouraging nod. "All right," Harry agreed. "But we start with theory and safety before any practical application." Thus began an unofficial study group that quickly became one of the most popular extracurricular activities at Hogwarts. 3 evenings a week, students from all houses gathered in an unused classroom to learn the basic principles of magical convergence from Harry, with Hermione providing structured lesson plans and research support. Dumbledore observed one such session from the doorway, eyes twinkling as he watched Harry patiently explain dimensional energy concepts to a group of fascinated sixth years. "Most impressive, Harry," the headmaster commented afterward. "You have a natural gift for teaching." Harry flushed with pleasure at the praise. "They're just curious. Once they understand the basic principles, the connections to traditional spell work become obvious." "To you, perhaps," Dumbledore said with a gentle smile. "But bridging these conceptual gaps for others, that requires not just knowledge but insight and communication skills. Gifts you possess in abundance." The end of term approached with mounting excitement. The Joint Oversight Committee would be presenting its preliminary findings on Harry's magical integration research, potentially establishing official recognition for convergent magical practices. Strange had been working with the committee for weeks, ensuring that the documentation accurately represented the principles and safeguards they had developed. The night before the committee's presentation, Harry sat by the lake with Ron and Hermione, enjoying the warm June evening. "Nervous about tomorrow?" Hermione asked, noting Harry's pensive expression. He shrugged. "A bit. It's weird having other people decide whether your magic is legitimate or not. It's rubbish that they get to decide at all," Ron declared loyally. "Your magic works, doesn't it? That should be the only thing that matters. In an ideal world, perhaps, Hermione said. But magical traditions have always had governing bodies that determine acceptable practices. It's about safety as much as control. It's about both, Harry acknowledged. Dr. Strange says new magical approaches always face this kind of scrutiny. The important thing is demonstrating consistent results and proper safeguards. Which you've done, Hermione said confidently. Harry nodded, though uncertainty lingered. We think so. But combining traditions this way, it's uncharted territory. There could be long-term effects we haven't anticipated. There could be brilliant long-term effects too, Ron pointed out. Like how your shield charms last twice as long with half the effort when you do that twisty hand thing. Harry grinned despite his concerns. Ron's straightforward perspective often cut through theoretical complications to practical realities. As darkness fell across the grounds, they made their way back to Gryffindor Tower, Harry's thoughts turning to the journey that had brought him here, from a cupboard under the stairs to the center of a magical revolution, all because Dr. Strange had sensed an anomaly and investigated personally. The next morning dawned clear and bright. The Great Hall buzzed with anticipation as students and staff gathered for the committee's announcement. Representatives from the ministry sat at a special table near the staff dais, alongside Masters Chen and Wong from Camartage. Strange stood conversing quietly with Dumbledore, both looking uncharacteristically formal in their respective traditional attire. Minister Bagnold herself had come for the occasion, underscoring the significance of the proceedings. As breakfast concluded, she rose to address the assembled school. Hogwarts students and staff, distinguished guests, she began, her voice magically amplified. Today marks a significant moment in magical educational history. For the past 6 months, a joint committee has been evaluating an unprecedented magical approach developed by one of your own, Mr. Harry Potter. All eyes turned to Harry, who maintained his composure despite the attention, just as Strange had taught him. The convergence of wizarding magic and what we now understand to be the mystic arts tradition has never been formally studied or sanctioned, Bagnold continued. Until now. She gestured to a thin wizard with spectacles who rose and unfurled an official-looking scroll. After extensive observation and analysis, the wizard read, the Joint Committee on Convergent Magical Practices has determined that the integrated magical system developed by Harry Potter under the tutelage of Dr. Stephen Strange represents a stable, coherent magical approach with significant potential applications in various fields. Murmurs rippled through the great hall. Harry felt a weight lifting from his shoulders, the official recognition they'd worked toward for months. Furthermore, the wizard continued, the committee recommends the establishment of a permanent research division within the Department of Mysteries to continue studying convergent magical applications, with appropriate safeguards and oversight. This announcement triggered louder reactions, some excited, some concerned. Harry caught Draco Malfoy's stunned expression from across the hall and suppressed a smile. Most significantly, Bagnold resumed, the committee has proposed, and the Wisengamot has approved, an amendment to educational statutes permitting supervised instruction in convergent magical practices at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, beginning next term. The great hall erupted in excited chatter. Harry sat in stunned silence, processing the implications. What had begun as his personal educational accommodation was evolving into an officially recognized magical discipline. Dumbledore stood, raising his hands for quiet. This represents an extraordinary opportunity for Hogwarts and for magical education more broadly. I am pleased to announce that Dr. Stephen Strange has agreed to serve as a visiting instructor next year, offering introductory convergent magic studies to interested students in 5th year and above. Strange inclined his head in acknowledgement as whispers and exclamations filled the hall. The Sorcerer Supreme of Earth, teaching at Hogwarts? It was unprecedented. Additionally, Dumbledore continued with evident satisfaction, Mr. Potter will assist in curriculum development, sharing his unique perspective as the first practitioner of fully integrated magical convergence. Harry felt Ron clap him on the shoulder, while Hermione beamed with pride. Across the hall, reactions ranged from excitement to apprehension, but the overwhelming sentiment seemed to be curious anticipation. As the formal announcements concluded and students began heading to their first classes, Strange made his way to where Harry sat. "Congratulations," he said simply. "You've helped open a door that has remained closed for centuries." "We did it together," Harry replied. "I couldn't have done any of this without your guidance." Strange's expression softened. "Perhaps. But the bridge between traditions required someone who could stand in both worlds naturally. That person was always going to be you, Harry, whether I found you that night or not." "If you hadn't found me," Harry began, then shook his head, unable to imagine how differently his life might have unfolded. "The universe has a way of manifesting necessities," Strange said cryptically. "Though I admit, I'm grateful it was I who sensed your magical awakening that night." Harry nodded, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "Me too." As they walked together from the Great Hall, students and staff parting respectfully before them, Harry reflected on the journey from frightened child to magical pioneer. There would be challenges ahead, resistance from traditionalists, unexpected consequences of magical innovation, the ongoing threat of Voldemort that lurked in the background of all his achievements. But today, in this moment, he stood at the convergence point of magical traditions, a living bridge between worlds that had remained separate for too long. Whatever the future held, that convergence had forever changed the course of magical history. "Ready for your next class?" Strange asked as they reached the entrance hall. Harry grinned. "Always ready to learn something new." After all, at the confluence of magical traditions, possibilities were as endless as the dimensions themselves. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.